Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто воде всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Есть.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 492 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And of course, we have some more big news today.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And of course, we're going to be immediately getting into the serious news tonight, once again revolving around the nuclear power plant. According to Ukrainian officials, they are still sounding massive alarms about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, otherwise known as ZNPP, that is along the coastline of the Nova Kakhovka reservoir. And in fact, it appears that they are taking the situation so seriously that they are now beginning training and drills for the event of a nuclear disaster. We're going to be getting into that news immediately tonight, starting at the nuclear power plant itself. And interesting news has come out that the Russians are apparently evacuating the people from around Enerhodar and the surrounding villages, as well as some of the people who actually worked at the nuclear power plant. And we're also hearing that the Russian army has been seen far less in this area as well. According to the Kyiv Post, the Russians are reducing their presence at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the Ukrainian main intelligence directorate reported. The Russian representatives of Rosatom have already left, and Ukrainian employees of the plant who signed contracts with Rosatom are being advised to evacuate by the 5th of July. Meanwhile, the number of military patrols in Enerhodar is gradually decreasing. And this is all quite serious news, of course. Rosatom is the company that ended up taking control of the nuclear power plant at the ZNPP, and Rosatom, as some people may be wise enough to see, is the Russian company that runs the nuclear reactors inside of the Russian Federation. When the Russians took over the Enerhodar nuclear power plant at around March of last year, they brought in Rosatom, and Rosatom immediately took control of the Enerhodar nuclear power plant and its operations. And we can see that the people from Rosatom who have been, the Rosatom representatives that have been at the nuclear power plant this entire time, nearly since April of last year, have now left. And this is, of course, quite concerning, and it's showing that these Rosatom officials may have some information that other people are not privy to at the moment. And it also appears that the Ukrainian employees of the power plant who have signed contracts with Rosatom have been informed by the company that they need to evacuate by the 5th of July, which is only about 6 days away at this point. That is all quite concerning, and what even adds more fuel to the fire is that military patrols, observed military patrols around the Enerhodar area, which is where the nuclear power plant is. It's within the nuclear town of Enerhodar right here. There are less military patrols occurring than normal. And all of this is starting to suggest that the Russians are moving people away from the Enerhodar nuclear power plant. And of course, the Ukrainians have been saying around a week and a half at this point that this is a part of a plan to create a meltdown at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and create a nuclear disaster. This, of course, can be quite serious. We have gone over this before on our channel, but to go over it again about the power plant itself, this is the largest power plant of its kind in all of Europe. With 6 operational nuclear reactors, it is also one of the highest power-generating nuclear reactors in the world. And it is quite a large one at that. Of course, problems were made when the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was deprived of its natural water source, the Nova Kakhovka reservoir, around the 6th of June, around a few weeks ago, when the Nova Kakhovka dam was blown up further downstream. Since then, the only water that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been able to operate off of is the water in the cooling pond, which power plant officials declared was not going to be suitable enough for the power plant to continue operating even at its reduced capacity at the moment. And of course, these pictures right here show the extent in which the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is being left without water. This is the Nova Kakhovka reservoir as it sits today. And we can see that the ground is beginning to dry out in this area. And we can see all the way from Nikopol to the nuclear power plant itself, and there is practically no water in this reservoir left. And so the cooling...
I saw that photo earlier today, and this one really got me shaken up. To see it actually that empty and basically bone dry, there's only a small little bit of water up here, way away from the plant. That's very disturbing.
Yeah, that is very disturbing to say the least. It's very similar, and of course, and many of y'all may know on this channel that Matthew and me are very familiar with a nuclear power plant here in the state of Alabama called the Browns Ferry nuclear power plant. The way that that reservoir has emptied, it would be almost similar to see the Tennessee River, well, Wheeler Lake, which is the reservoir on the Tennessee River, This would be similar to seeing the Wheeler Lake completely emptied of any water, and the only water that's left would be in the cooling ponds around the Browns Ferry nuclear power plant. It is as concerning of a situation at the ZNPP as that situation would be for the state of Alabama and the Browns Ferry nuclear power plant on Wheeler Lake. And so, of course, the situation is incredibly severe, especially as far as cooling for the power plant goes. Now, of course, I always have to make this disclaimer because we apparently have more nuclear physicists that show up in our comment section than there are that exist in the world, but many people want to insist that the nuclear power plant is actually just fine, and there's no way for this thing to go into a meltdown. However, we have heard that IAEA officials have already said that with the power plant in its current state, it will be avoiding a serious situation for the next several months. Meaning that there will be a serious situation at some point in the power plant's next several operational months. We have even heard the officials that operate the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant say that the situation is already dire and severe consequences such as a meltdown could begin to occur soon. And so, going off of the people who kind of have some slight dealings with the nuclear power plant, the people who actually operate these reactors at this nuclear power plant, all of them are nearly in agreement that something serious will be happening at this nuclear power plant if things don't change soon. And it appears that the Russians, through Rosatom, are also picking up on that as well, and they're now advising people to evacuate by the 5th of July, suggesting that whatever may happen at the power plant may happen before the 5th of July, at least from what we're seeing right now. And this is not contained to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And to really quickly bring y'all here are the effects. This was actually listed by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. This is an actual bulletin by the atomic scientists, so there's really no way to say that these people don't know what they're talking about, because these are the guys whose job it is to talk about atomic science, or nuclear science for that matter, such as the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And they wrote a very extensive article right here about the kind of damage and effects that would be had by a nuclear meltdown at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's incredibly extensive. And we're going to be trying to read through it a little bit, and also Matthew will probably hop in here and there because, of course, many of y'all saw that Matthew made the short war summary today, and he did an incredible job and did a decent amount of research on this nuclear reactor. So we're both going to be breaking this down together and seeing what kind of results the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists believe that a nuclear meltdown at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant may have, not just on Ukraine, but the rest of the world. And so, as Russian military forces shelled the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant on the March 4th of 2022, a fire broke out on the site. Among the 6 reactor units of the complex, auxiliary buildings attached to Zaporizhzhia Unit 1 were damaged. Fortunately, the damage did not threaten the safety of the unit, and a recent assessment by the IAEA indicates that although management of the plant by a Russian military commander is less than ideal, quote-unquote, regular staff continue to operate the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and, quote-unquote, at least 11 representatives of the Russian state company Rosatom were also present there without interfering with the operation of the nuclear facility. That's, of course, according to the IAEA. And there has been some doubts about what the IAEA has been saying in that situation, because a while ago, as many of y'all may know, around January and December of December of last year and January of this year, the IAEA was actually talking about how much of a disaster the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant could turn into under Russian control. And after they went out there around, I believe it was February or March, and observed the power plant themselves, they then began to try and downplay a little bit of what was going on, although there were blatant violations of international law. For example, the storage of Russian military equipment inside of some of the hangar bays that are attached to the power plant itself. But moving on from that, we're going to be moving on a little bit further down to the radiological fallout. To assess the impact of radiological fallout on the population and land area, the atmospheric dispersion following the releases was simulated using the high-split model provided by the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA, and a population database provided by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. The simulations ingested meteorological data from the Global Data Assimilation Systems, GDAS, and were conducted as if the radiation release and spread happened in the 3rd and 4th weeks of March of 2021. On the maps in Figure 1 below, the contamination levels for compulsory evacuation are shown in orange, and those for voluntary evacuation in yellow. The yellow areas corresponds to contamination levels greater than 0.5 mega, and also, Matthew, do you know how that is pronounced?
Let's see. Where do the mouse around it?
Right here?
Mega biquerals, maybe? I have no idea. I've never even seen that word.
I've never seen that one before. Per square meter and is less than 1.5 MB. We'll say that it's MB. Oh, actually MBQ, because we can actually see the abbreviation for it down there. 1.5 MBQ per square meter. The orange area corresponds to contamination levels greater than 1.5 MBQ per square meter. As shown in the maps, populations could have to be relocated in up to 5 countries, depending on the type of nuclear incident and the weather patterns. And so moving on down into the graph, we can see the areas of mandatory evacuation in orange and of voluntary evacuation in yellow. And we can see that this radiation fallout is actually going to be affecting a vast area. Most of it, actually, at least this northern field of radioactive contamination, would actually consist of an area of a large part of Belarus. I believe that actually...
Wait a second. You know, I just had a revelation real quick. This is speculation, just to make that clear off the bat. Putin sent Wagner to Belarus. Aren't they in that exact spot where that fallout is going to go?
Actually, they are, aren't they? That's actually a good point. That's where the camp is.
That's a hell of a revelation. Seeing that on a map now that just clicked in my head, the Wagner are right in that zone in Belarus where that fallout's going to go.
They are, aren't they? That is something I didn't realize.
That might have been a smart move on Putin's part, trying to eliminate that group.
Shoigu! We are suffering from radiation poisoning, plant. But anyways, we can see the map here of the radioactive contamination and where it would reach, and this is according to a simulation done on the 3rd week of March of 2021, and we can see that the largest field of radioactive contamination for voluntary evacuation would exist in the western area of Ukraine, just northwest of Kyiv, and also would stretch almost all the way south of Belarus, and would also encompass the somewhat larger town of Mazir in Belarus, among many other places. Interestingly enough, that radiation field almost completely falls within the Chernobyl exclusion zone that exists in Belarus as well. And so the radiation would almost end up affecting the same area there, but it will also affect a pretty decent amount of Ukraine. Not only that, we can see on this first graph here the kind of effects this would have to NATO, as a large radioactive field would end up depositing itself into the northeastern part of Romania, in this area up here. Unfortunately, I can't really pronounce Romanian town names fairly well, except for Bucharest, so I'm not even going to try. But this entire area would be radiated enough that the government of Romania would have to make a decision whether they would voluntarily ask for evacuations to be done, or whether they would force them, or something similar, because radioactive contamination in this area would exist, and it would most likely be significant for quite some while. And so it is a quite concerning situation. In the second simulated contamination, this is a simulated contamination level after a hypothetical core meltdown at Zaporizhzhia 1 using weather information from the 4th week of March. And we can see here that the radiation is largely contained in the second simulation to the southern area of Ukraine, mostly in Kherson, but a mandatory evacuation had to be made of the entire area for the most part, around the Nova Kakhovka reservoir all the way down nearly to Nova Kakhovka itself, to try and highlight this, around to here, and all the way out to Tokmak in this direction, kind of in a semicircle. Everything in this area would have to mandatorily be evacuated. It would not be able to be lived within or populated, or most likely for the next several centuries, due to radiological contamination. And interestingly enough, this radioactive contamination would also reach all the way down, for some reason completely missing Crimea. The radioactive field would reach all the way down to northern Turkey and end up depositing itself onto the Sinop Peninsula just on the north of Turkey, and mandatory evacuations would have to be made there as well due to the sheer level of radioactive contamination that would be had in that area. Probably the worst simulation that I've seen are the next ones that follow, as the radioactive contamination in these maps far outweigh the radioactive contaminations that we saw in the first 2 maps. And so while everyone thought, oh, it's not that bad, it's about to get far worse. And these are most likely going to be the more realistic options that we see. While they are the worst case scenarios, they also appear to be the most realistic. Moving on into our third simulation, this was once again using weather information from the third week of March. And this is a simulated contamination level after a hypothetical spent fuel pool fire at Zaporizhzhia Power Plant number 1. Spent fuel pools exist right outside of the power plant. You can actually see some of these spent fuel pools right in this area here, right outside the nuclear power plant. And these are used to store the spent fuel rods of the power plant. And this is what's quite concerning, is that these could have caught on fire at any given moment when there is shelling going on around the power plant. If one of those shells falls into the spent rod pool, it is entirely possible that a fire could break out in that pool, and this kind of radioactive contamination could have happened. We can see that practically an entire strip through western Ukraine has to mandatorily be evacuated due to the amount of radioactive contamination. Not only that, towns like Kryvyi Rih and Cherkasy are also in the incredibly thick radioactive path, according to this simulation, and even other areas, almost to the town of Kharkiv. Kharkiv is right down here, but this would be the area of Sumy, and this would be the general area of Chernihiv up here. They would also have to be mandatorily evacuated due to radioactive contamination. Not only that, an incredibly large part of Belarus, nearly a quarter of their country, would be irradiated to the point it would be uninhabitable. And a decent chunk of Romania, once again the northeastern area, would again be completely uninhabitable. So this area up here would have to be evacuated due to radioactive contamination, and people would most likely not be able to live there for the next 2 centuries due to the radioactive fallout. Moving on from that one and on into our next one, this is very similar to this graph here, but once again talking about a spent fuel pool fire, and once again on the same week, the 4th week of March of 2021. We can of course see that most of northern Turkey at this point, or the area of the Ankara Peninsula, would be uninhabitable at that point. So this would include an area all the way from Samsun to the Sinop Peninsula and as far into Korum. That would be an area that would be practically uninhabitable at that point, and once again affecting another NATO country. Not only that, but almost the entirety of the Kherson Oblast would be uninhabitable at that point, as well as about half of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Once again, incredibly serious. Moving on into our next graph, and once again to go through all of these because I think it's very important to lay out the seriousness of this nuclear disaster if it is to occur, and this is of course from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which are probably some of the most well-versed people in nuclear science that publish things like this. We can see that this is a simulated contamination level after a hypothetical accident due to a simultaneous core meltdown and spent fuel pool fire at Zaporizhzhia 1 using weather information from the 3rd week. And once again, the contamination levels here are almost the same that is seen in a spent fuel pool fire, but of course a little bit worse due to the core meltdown. And once again, it is quite a large area of contamination. Millions of people would be affected, and not just that, NATO countries would be affected. And moving on down here, it's once again simulating a core meltdown and a spent fuel pool fire at Zaporizhzhia 1, and you can see that the results are far worse. And we can even see parts of the Black Sea at this point, due to the radioactive contamination, would be practically unusable to anybody for the near future. In fact, the Black Sea may become heavily irradiated due to the circulation of these highly irradiated waters that would now be inside of the Black Sea itself. And so these are all quite serious, and you can see that the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists is laying out that this is nearly a doomsday situation, especially as far as Eastern Europe goes. Many countries will be greatly affected. The countries that we can see will be affected the most from this kind of a nuclear meltdown would be Ukraine, Belarus, and Romania, and also some small parts of Moldova. This is quite serious. If we were to try and get a population density chart, and let me see if I can, population density chart, Eastern Europe. Let's see if we can get a population chart here. So here's the best population chart we can get. And we can see that in most of this northeastern part of Romania, there is a population density per square mile of at least 200 to over 1,250 people per square mile as a consistent basis. And that entire area would have to be evacuated. Not only that, but the large parts of Ukraine that would be irradiated also have a pretty high population density as well, and would also have to have forced evacuations. Of course, I can't stress enough how serious this is, not only just for the amount of people that would be under a heavy amount of radiation would have to be evacuated mandatorily from the area, but this would also heavily affect agriculture, among other things in Europe, that could start to have serious, long-lasting effects. And all of this is, of course, being, as a result, from the Russians possibly melting down the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And from what we're hearing from Budanov, which is Ukraine's intelligence chief, he is saying that there is a plan undergoing right now, and as more and more information is coming out, for example, Rosatom telling the Ukrainian employees that they need to evacuate by the 5th of July, it does appear that something quite concerning is going to be happening. And the Ukrainians are trying to be on top of things instead of trying to catch up with them, and they're now beginning training and drills for a nuclear disaster in Zaporizhzhia. And we saw one of those pictures today right here. This is a rescue worker in a protective suit participating in emergency service training in Zaporizhzhia just yesterday. And this is a part of the Ukrainians' plan that if a nuclear meltdown is to happen, they are going to have first responders on the ground immediately, helping to evacuate the millions of people that most likely will be affected across the entirety of Ukraine. And of
Is that
course,
basically what they did during Chernobyl as well? They just went around trying to get people out? Because I remember in the town that was next to Chernobyl, what was that place called? Pripyat. They had basically just put people on buses and bust them out. Really, how do you even prepare for something like this? Like, what are the preparations they're going through to get ready for it?
the preparations that they're most likely going through are just mass evacuation plans. That's really all they can do at the immediate point of a nuclear meltdown, because everything else is secondary. You have to contain the meltdown first before liquidation can begin. So the first plan will have to be some kind of an evacuation. And we are talking about a monumental scale of an evacuation. If we were just to take the population of Zaporizhzhia, the population of Zaporizhzhia in 2017 was 750,000 people. To put that into perspective, the amount of people that had to be evacuated from the Chernobyl and Pripyat area was somewhere around 90,000 people to 110,000 people, and that was considered a monumental effort by the Soviet government to evacuate all of those people in a matter of around a single day or 2 days. And we're looking at just 750,000 people in the city of Zaporizhzhia alone. And according to the simulations by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, Zaporizhzhia will always be affected from a nuclear meltdown at the ZNPP. Every single time, Zaporizhzhia will fall into a mandatory evacuation field. And so we can see that that's going to be quite a challenge for the Ukrainians to handle, is trying to get a 750,000 people out of Zaporizhzhia and to somewhere safe. And not only that, there are multiple cities over here in western Ukraine, such as Zhytomyr and Vinnytsia, that would also have to be evacuated as well, maybe even Chernovysky, because these areas would be under a mandatory radioactive evacuation zone. You would have to get these people out of there, otherwise they'll start to suffer from very serious health implications because of what is happening there. And it is, of course, quite a serious situation, and one that really would be out of scale, something that no one would really even be able to handle if a nuclear meltdown like that begins to happen. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the nuclear news and the massive news that has been happening there, and we're now going to be moving on into Russia for just a short little glimmer of hope from inside of Russia. We heard that a lady from Russia, right here, her name is Valeria Zotova, was given 6 years in prison because she set fire to a collection point for aid to the Russian military. And so, you know, like
Wow.
a couple of bucks and dollars and maybe some band-aids, she set them on fire and she got 6 years in prison.
That's pretty harsh.
That's pretty harsh, but you got to say that was a nice thing for her to do. I don't know how much of an effect it would really have on the war, but it still shows that there is going to be resistance inside of Russia from some people who do oppose the war. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of sabotage news and on into Ukraine itself. And most importantly, over here real quick, because this doesn't really have to do with the ZNPP, but it does have to do with the Dnipro River area. And in Kherson today, we saw something very interesting. Many of y'all may know that the Ukrainians now hold a very strong foothold on the left bank of the Dnipro River inside of the town of Dachi, which is directly on the other side from Kherson. It appears that the Russians have not been able to uproot Ukrainian forces that are holding the town of Dachi, and from what we understand, the Ukrainians are actually going into some pretty good depth about what they control in Dachi, which is actually the entire village. They don't control anything out of it. It doesn't appear that they've tried to push into the marshes or the swamps that we're seeing right outside of Dachi, but they control the village. And the Russians are in a very tight spot as far as it comes to trying to retake Dachi. The only way to enter Dachi is to drive down the E97 highway. This area is completely impassable to armored vehicles such as BMPs, BTRs, or Russian main battle tanks such as the T-72 and T-80 because the ground is literally a marsh. You can't really drive a tank through that, so the only way to get armor or infantry down to Dachi is to drive in a straight line for about 4 miles down the E97 highway and directly into Dachi. That has proven to be completely impossible for the Russians over this past week. It appears that they have not been able to push down the highway successfully. They have taken some considerable losses in the attempt, and the Ukrainians still hold a very strong foothold inside of the town of Dachi. To explain the theory behind this, because someone actually mentioned this on our stream, and I have a feeling that a lot of people are catching on now, the hope in the capture of Dachi is that the Ukrainians are able to do something similar to what the Russians did when they controlled Kherson, which is to create a pontoon bridge directly parallel to the Antonovsky Bridge, and then ferry over further reinforcements and troops that will then drive down the E97 highway, probably with a large amount of artillery support, to capture the town of Zelenskyy, and then from there, a considerable foothold has been made on the other side of the Dnipro River, and further offensives can be made that will reach towards Zelenskyy Sands and maybe down to Armyansk. That appears to be the overall plan of Ukrainian forces that are in the area at the moment, and that is why they are holding the town of Dachi. In fact, the Ukrainians hold the town of Dachi so strongly that the Russians had to whip out an Iskander and slam it into the middle of the village in hopes of trying to break up the defenses of the Ukrainians and give them a chance to retake the village. So here's a video clip real quick of a drone observing that Iskander slamming into Dachi right over here. And there's the Iskander hit directly on the base of the bridge on the left side.
Finally, they hit something.
They finally hit something, but honestly, where that hit, you see where it hit right there, like on the highway? It hit about right here. And this area is completely empty. You know, so it's
Well,
like,
I mean, they gave it a good old college try for the Russians.
I mean, they gave it a good college try, yeah, but they didn't hit anything where the Ukrainian soldiers really were. We have seen combat footage from this area, and we've seen that the Russians push down the highway, and they make it into this open area, and it appears that a killing field has been made here, where Ukrainian forces practically encircle it in a bowl, and so if you enter it, you pretty much get shot at with anti-tank weapons from all sides, and everything that's entered this area so far appears to have been destroyed or wiped out. So the Russians hit their own, the Russians hit the killing field where their own tanks would die. They didn't really hit any Ukrainian defenses in this area, and so it appears that that was completely unsuccessful, but once again showing the severity of the situation for the Russians. They were not able to push the Ukrainians out at this point, and now they're going to be at the whim, or really having to wait to see what the Ukrainians are now going to do, now that they have a pretty much immovable foothold on the village of Dachi. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Kherson area, because that is, of course, massive news and amazing to see. And we're now going to be moving on into our location unknown, starting off with our first clip of an Mi-8, Ukrainian Mi-8 flying at night. And also I have to mute that.
Oh, boom shakalaka.
Boom shakalaka. But we can see the instrument panels of the Mi-8 all lit up. I gotta say that looks really cool. We don't really get to see.
Pretty sick.
Yeah, we don't really get to see this much. And considering that this thing looks like a flying living room, I'll show it to y'all. This thing here. Let me go find the right one. These usually don't have the nice looking little nose cone like this one has. They usually have the like living room glass layout. Let me see if I can find one. Here we go. That's probably the best one. This kind of nose cone. It is so weird to see what the inside of that helicopter looks like at night. It doesn't really look like a flying living room anymore. It looks like you're about to be in the middle of a movie set. But of course, a really cool video to see. We rarely ever see anything like that. Moving on from that and into our next clip of Location Unknown News, we also saw the Russians have created a thingamajig, or a thingamabob as they've been called. Matthew, prepare yourself. I think this gives the Rhodesians a run for their money.
Oh, what in the hell? Is that a jet turbine on the back?
No, it's I don't know. Dude, wait a minute. No, that's actually a muffler.
A muffler, but there's nothing really attached to it.
Not really. You can see it goes into the engine bay, though, because the engine's, I think, right here in the MTLB, and there's the muffler attached to the exhaust, and then they put this giant muffler on it. and then a little
Oh no,
pipe.
I'm talking about that big silver thing on the back. What is that up there?
What, this thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an S8 rocket launcher, Matthew, for rockets.
Oh hell, it looked like a jet turbine or something that they stuck on the back.
Rocket pod. Let me see if I can find this for you. So this is an S8 rocket pod that we're looking at right there. There's one mounted onto the side of maybe a helicopter or a plane. And we can also see right here another one mounted onto another MTLB. That's actually a tandem S8 rocket pod right there, one on each side. But anyways, pretty bizarre to see this kind of crazy crap. They put one of these on here, and it doesn't even look like there's any good way to aim it. And then on the backside, they put a Vasilic automatic mortar. I don't really know what the plan is here, because when you fire the rocket pod, it's going to burn the mortar. And if you fire the mortar, I don't even know what how the hell you would really fire the mortar. I've got to be honest with y'all. I'd be at a complete loss as to how to fire that automatic mortar. But this has got to be one of the most jank-looking MTLBs I've ever seen in the war so far, and I had to show it to y'all because I think it's giving the Rhodesians a run for their money as far as the improvised vehicles go. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this unholy abomination and on into our next bit of news, where we can see our Kirpy having to get unstuck in the summer mud. Also, we're going to have to mute it because it has copyrighted music. But we can see the Kirpy whipping it in forward and now whipping it in reverse. And oh, it looks like it made traction. We can now see it going forward again. And finally being able to roll out a little bit. And we can now see the tires struggling once again in the mud. And now someone's come up and politely closed the door. Very nice guy.
Man, it's like those tires have no tread left on them or something.
Yeah, man, these tires are slick. And now we can see them. It looks like the Kirpy may have been able to make it out. And it finally did. And it passed a lotta.
Oh, dear.
Oh, please.
Bad luck.
And now the Kirpy finally made it out. Dude, they just driving the school bus through the forest. Dude, get the freaking school bus out, man. I'm not going to lie, though. The Kirpy is pretty cool looking. Because it looks like a school bus.
They're using, like, you know, those, like, pool, like, inflatable donut things that you float around in for tires.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're using. But with that, great to see it got unstuck. And on into our next clip, we also saw a Russian ammo warehouse get destroyed today in an unknown location. Oh, you hear the trap remix.
A nice trap hit.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. But anyways, we can
That
see
guy's running turbo speed. Look at him go.
Man, dude, they having a little bit of speed. We now see the Ukrainian artillery firing, and now we're about to see the ammo depot blow up. We can see the shell hit, and now we're waiting for the fire, or more so the explosion. I'm sure it's coming any minute now. That's the end of the clip. Okay, all right. Well, it's nice to see them hit it. We didn't really see a massive explosion, but still great to know they were able to get an ammo depot. Moving on to our next clip, we can also see that the Russians have created some brand new improvised drone nets, as seen right here. But the caption was quite observant. The turret can't spin anymore. It's kind of stuck looking forward, because the mounts for the front of the net actually stop the barrel from rotating further left or right than really just direct front.
Interesting.
So pretty much this tank is unusable at this point. If they want to fire the tank, they have to turn the entire tank to where they want to shoot. There's no more firing to the right or firing to the left. It's all going to be firing from the front from here forward. So, not really a smart design, but I guess it'll maybe help them out with drones a little, but I'm quite skeptical on that. I'm sure it probably won't help them out at all. Anyways, moving on from that, we also got the Russian casualty report today, which appeared to be quite extensive. And so let's take a look.
Oh, man, they went back down to 0 Bobcats again.
No
what in
Bobcats.
the world?
And
I saw Gary say, 0-0. Oh, no, Matt. And it's a rough day for Matt, I'm telling you. Oh, I'm telling you.
Oh, you almost had it. You ought to be quicker than that. But anyways, let's see if we got any more memes. Doesn't really look like we had any more memes. Everyone was kind of bummed out that there were no Bobcats destroyed. But in other frontline categories, we did see that the Ukrainians were able to keep up some consistent losses. 540 Russian soldiers have been wiped out over the past 24 hours, along with 6 armored personnel carriers, 5 supply trucks, 3 tanks, 11 artillery pieces, 6 drones, 3 MLRSs, and an anti-aircraft system. So it's a fairly decent day on the front lines. It's not anything to really woo about, but it is still great to know that the Ukrainians are still able to consistently destroy Russian forces on a given basis. And so for that, I'm pretty happy to see that the losses are keeping at a consistent rate. But moving on out of our location unknowns and on into the frontline news, there is a massive amount of it today, and it does appear that the Ukrainians are still conducting a fairly large offensive as of today, and it appears they may be able to take a little bit of ground as well. We've seen that they have been able to take some ground in the area of Bakhmut again today. But there are many questions that y'all have had tonight, and I want to make sure that we hear out what many of y'all have been thinking and what many of y'all have voted on about these top questions of the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and moving right into our first poll, it says Russia has begun evacuating employees at the Ukraine nuclear power plant, and the forces are reduced. And what are your thoughts? 50% said not good, an attack is coming. 27% said it sounds like Russia knows it's bad. 14% says unsure, and 10% says it simply means they are leaving. And with the deadline for them leaving being July 1st, that is right around the corner, like the enforcer said earlier. I really don't see a legitimate reason they would be leaving unless they knew something bad was coming. Because, like I said earlier today in the short war summary, that position is very defensible because the Ukrainians aren't going to try to hit it because they don't want to blow it up. So for them to be leaving right now, that's not a good sign in my opinion. Not trying to fearmonger, but it just doesn't look good. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would also have to say it is a very concerning situation. We usually don't like to talk in a fear-mongering way on this channel about anything, but a lot is starting to line up, as well as the Ukrainians constantly, pretty much not even blowing a whistle. They are screaming at the entire world that something is going to happen at this power plant soon. It does appear that it's a very serious situation at the moment, and it does suggest that there possibly will be a nuclear disaster, and the Russians evacuating people from the area doesn't help out in the idea that nothing is going to be happening there. And so, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well in my opinion, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and also had a student, a bot real quick, he's gone. But anyways, moving on to our second poll, it says, should NATO preemptively deploy a small intervention team to secure the Ukraine nuclear plant? 65% said yes, it's better to take a risk now. 14% said it depends on how this unfolds. 14% said no, it's too risky at this time. And 8% said unsure. And for me personally, I think the risk of sending in a small intervention team right now outweighs the risk of waiting for later. Other way around, actually. I just got that all mixed up. But anyways, I think we ought to send in an intervention team right now to go ahead and secure that plant, so that way nothing bad happens to it, and we prevent a major nuclear catastrophe from happening. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I would certainly agree that there needs to be some kind of an intervention team created to go into the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant area and restore order to the power plant and ensure that there won't be any disaster that occurs. We keep on hearing that the situation is getting worse and worse, and everything's starting to suggest that the situation is in fact compounding into being far worse than it really would be. And so I would certainly agree that we need to send in a reaction force, or a I guess, well, what was the wordage we were just using a minute ago? I forgot it.
Intervention team. That's the fancy word.
Intervention team. I think there needs to be an intervention to have happened at the Enerhdar nuclear power plant. I don't know why you and me are both losing our ability to speak on this one, but intervention team needed. Intervention team good. Now we're turning into caveman Matthew. Oh, Grug, nuclear intervention. Yeah. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, I just want to say I saw a couple folks say that ain't going to happen and not going to work. My thing is this. It's a huge step, I will admit, to send in NATO troops whatsoever into Ukraine to do anything, but hear me out. Are we going to let the thing blow up, potentially, and it's looking like it's getting more likely than not that it's actually going to blow up? Are we going to let that happen and potentially kill a ton of people to avoid maybe taking a small risk by sending a small group of forces in to make sure that nothing happens? To me, it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and do that. To me, it seems kind of cowardly not to, but that's just my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with that.
I would have to agree with Matthew on that as well, because a lot of people are saying it's not going to happen, or we shouldn't do that, or it can't happen. And Matthew's got a great point there. Are we going to allow a disaster that will affect NATO to happen because we don't want to have the diplomatic fallout if we go in there and we intervene? I would have to be honest with y'all. It's time to send in the troops. America is known for sending in troops. For everyone to always talk about how America always puts its nose into other people's business, whether it has a right to or not, it's very weird to see that a lot of people don't want us to put our nose into business that will directly affect us if things go south. And things look like they are going south right now. And I would rather step in and intervene as a precaution than sit there and wait for this thing to melt down and then have millions of people who are being irradiated, and also a massive disaster that will affect NATO and the rest of the world for decades, if not centuries. And so I would say we certainly need to get in there right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our third and last poll of the first segment says Poland has requested nuclear weapons from the USA, and they cite the new Wagner threat from Belarus. And what are your thoughts? 39% said absolutely do not give them nukes. 27% said sure, give them to Poland, it's fine. 23% said that we could at least consider it, and 12% said unsure. And I'm personally against giving Poland nukes for any reason, and I definitely don't think that the Wagner threat from Belarus is a legitimate reason to give them nukes. I understand that Poland wants to be proactive here, but that is not the answer in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
My answer is the Los Angeles class ballistic missile submarine. That fixes the whole situation already. As some of y'all may know, I know, is Rob Eisman in the chat tonight, Matthew? Tell me that. Is he?
He is not tonight.
Dang
I don't
it.
think. Yeah, he's not.
Our Submariner is not in the chat. As many of y'all may know, we have hundreds of nuclear warheads. Let's do the math, Matthew. There are 24 nuclear warheads on 24 nuclear missiles on the submarine, and each of those carry 12 nuclear warheads. So 24 times 12 is 288. There are about 288 nuclear warheads on a single United States ballistic missile submarine. And going off of that, we can get the pretty good idea that just putting a single Ohio-class nuclear submarine somewhere in the Baltic Sea would do the job. I would honestly think we don't need to be sending out nukes to anyone. From what I understand, though, Matthew, I believe the Polish were saying that that they were giving permission to the United States to station their nuclear weapons in Poland, which I do think would be a bit of a different scenario. I don't think we should give the Polish nuclear weapons for any reason. I'm not really a big fan of having nuclear proliferation become a thing in the modern day where everyone gets a nuclear weapon if they want one. I'm not into that. I believe nuclear weapons should be limited to a few countries, and the few countries that have them should have their nuclear arsenals further limited to a minimal amount. Of course, not non-existent, because that would be unrealistic, but a minimal amount that could only cause devastating damage but couldn't wipe out the world's population 5 times over. But
yeah, and also, by the way, the specific wording in the release here is that Poland has requested for the U.S. to begin the deployment of nuclear weapons into Poland. So you're probably right. They want U.S. nuclear weapons stationed in Poland. They don't necessarily want to own the weapons, but to me, that's almost the same thing.
It's not really the same thing. We do have nuclear weapons inside of Germany right now.
But in essence, though, because Poland's not going to launch a nuke without NATO's backing them up for doing it, they're all going to have to basically come to a consensus before they launch a nuke at anyone. So it does no good to simply give them to Poland or simply put them there either way. To me, it's almost the same thing. Because Russia's going to take it the same way.
I would be honest, I don't see it the same way. When we had nuclear weapons in West Germany during the Cold War, that would be similar to having nuclear weapons in Poland right now. It's the frontier of the NATO alliance. It's the frontier of the Western world at this point against Russia and Belarus. And considering that the Belarusians have had nuclear weapons put in Belarus, which is similar to us putting nuclear weapons in Turkey in the late 1950s, our response would be similar to the Soviets trying to send nuclear weapons to Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Of course, even then, I don't believe the Cubans were actually going to control the nuclear weapons. They were just the ones that were stationing Soviet nuclear weapons inside of their country. But I would say I actually wouldn't be that against the idea of Poland having U.S. nuclear weapons stationed inside of their borders. I'm not into the idea of them having the nuclear weapons and possessing them and then controlling them, but I am into the idea of the United States being able to move our nuclear weapons, land-based nuclear weapons, inside of Poland to be used if things go from bad to the worst that could be possibly imagined. But at the same time, I do have to remind everyone, we don't even really need to take that measure because we do have nuclear submarines traveling under the waters of the world right now. who knows where. Probably a good amount of them are actually around China and Russia at this moment as we speak, completely undetected, floating silently a couple of 100 feet below the waves, ready to launch nuclear weapons if the order is ever given. And so I have a feeling, and also Dorfin Horler said there is a treaty that limits subs to 20 nuclear missiles per sub. And let me check that real quick. Ohio.
That really did a lot of good.
Sub.
You can only have 20 of those things on your sub.
Let's see here. Let me see.
Also, by the way, what is the other closest NATO country that has nukes closest to Poland? Is it Germany?
Let's see. We have nuclear weapons stationed in Germany, but I think the ones that actually own nuclear weapons that are closest to Poland would be the French, with around 400 nuclear weapons.
I mean, that's close enough. I mean, is putting them in Poland really making that big of a difference, except, you know, escalating the situation dramatically?
It wouldn't really make that much of a difference, honestly. Most of the nuclear weapons we would be moving over there would probably be tactical nuclear weapons that would be dropped from an aircraft, so it won't really make that much of a difference, because I believe most American aircraft could probably take the leg from Germany over Poland into a front line and drop the tactical nukes there if they needed to, so it wouldn't really make that much of a difference. But from what I can see here, the Ohio-class submarine can carry, and let's see here, Mark 48 torpedoes. We're looking for, wait, hang on. Let's see here. It's a ballistic missile submarine, and if I'm correct, submarine launch ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. So this is the correct submarine, I do believe. Yeah, you can see the launch doors back there. But I'm trying to figure out how many silos it has. Determine that of the 18 would be operant, 14 would be sufficient for the strategic needs of the U.S., so we have 4 extra. But how many missiles can the Ohio class carry? That is the question. And we're trying to find an answer here. How many missiles? We'll just type that in. Missile count. Missiles. We'll just put that in. I'm sure that'll get us an answer. Let's see. One second. Excuse me, Aaron.
Oh, damn. Bless you.
Thank you. It can carry up to 24 submarine-launched ballistic missiles with multiple independently targeted warheads. So while there may be a treaty out there that limits the carrying of only 20 nuclear missiles per submarine, the Ohio-class submarine can technically carry 24 of these missiles, and I believe each of them have around 12 nuclear warheads inside of them, so you get around 288 nuclear warheads total inside of a single Ohio-class submarine. We have 18 of them as well, so if you take 288, and that's of course just considering that it's violating treaties and is carrying the maximum allowable number, and we multiply that by 18, there are 5,184 nuclear warheads on board all of our submarines out there in the world. And all of these have the range to strike as far into China or as far into Russia as we could ever hope to. So considering that these submarines are out there, I think it really negates the need to have nuclear weapons stationed inside of Poland, considering that just 2 of these could flatten the entire western land area of Russia for the large part. So I have a feeling we won't really need... I have a feeling we don't really need them in Poland, but if we ever did, it's good to know that they are making the offer. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are all out of super chat questions, not super chats, polls. I'm trying to write a poll as we speak. So we're moving on to our super chat questions, and up first, we have a very generous $50 donation from James Hughes. And thank you very much, James, for that very generous support. He says, "Dear Enforcer, I saw some American Army guy named McGregor. Have you heard of him? And he seemed negative on Ukraine, and Russia is playing possum from just north of Atlanta." And real quick, Enforcer, before you answer that question, I actually watched a few episodes of this guy on a pretty decent podcast. They brought him on as a guest, and I have never heard such a horrible analysis in my life. The guy got so many things wrong. He claimed that the Russians were treating Ukrainian POWs with respect and dignity, which is completely false, and the Ukrainians were the only ones beating and mistreating POWs. We know for a fact that is not true, and he said all kinds of things that were wrong. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the guy's an idiot. I don't mean to be incredibly strong-worded about that, but I've never seen anyone who just comes out and puts out the stupidest statements so many times in a row and gets everything wrong. This guy actually said at the beginning of the war in Ukraine that it will take a week for Russia to win the war and it'll be over. And then once they passed a week, he said, oh, wait, it'll actually take about a month. And then a month passed, and he said, 3 more months and it'll be over. And he's pretty much a coping pro-Russian supporter at this point. The guy just says things that make no sense. In fact, one of the stupidest things I've ever heard this guy say so far is that Russia would win against the United States in a conventional war. I've never heard anything.
Putin even admitted himself that Russia would lose against NATO or the USA even alone in a conventional war.
Yeah, I mean, like, even Putin knows that. And he's the guy who leads Russia. And this stupid guy saying, oh, the Russians would win in a conventional war against the United States. It's like, have you seen what Ukraine's doing to them with our 40-year-old tech? Imagine what we would do to them with what we actually use today. It would be unbelievable. It would be a slaughter. There's no doubt about it. And anyways, the Russians are poorly experienced in war. The United States is experienced doctrinally in asymmetrical warfare and linear warfare like we're seeing right now. We have bounds of experience, not just experience, but we have the tech and the funds to back it up. Not just that, how in the world do the Russians expect to actually win a war? How in the world does this guy expect Russia to win a war when air superiority would be achieved by the United States most likely within the first week or 2 weeks of open combat? There's no doubt about that. That's not anything coming out as a propaganda thing or a thing to make America feel good. Our entire doctrine revolves around achieving air supremacy nearly immediately in conventional warfare. That is the main thing. That's why the United States Air Force and the U.S. Navy is so large combined that every other air force in the world combined hardly even surpasses the size of just the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy's air arm. That's our entire premise, is to just achieve air superiority and then bomb people to oblivion, and then the army comes through and they clean up everything that's left behind. It's ridiculous. Really, anyone could beat the Russians at this point. Hell, I would expect the Polish, with a 77,000 man strong army, could end up giving the Russians a run for their money at this point. They're using T-62s and T-55s already. In probably the next few months, we're going to see that there are no T-72s and T-80s left for the Russian army. It will all be T-62s and T-55s. And that is supposed to beat the United States that has nothing but M1A2s, nothing but AH-64 Apaches to back them up, nothing but the most modern and advanced aircraft. Hell, the F-35s could be used alone and probably wipe the floor. It's a ridiculous notion to make. I don't like this McGregor guy. I think he's ridiculous. And of course, I also have to say this as well. It appears, and I did some research on this guy after I heard his stupid points. He was suggested for a political position a couple of years ago. I'm not making any comment about that. I'm just making a comment about his analysis of Russia currently in this war. It is absolutely ridiculous. The guy may as well just be a Russia-loving traitor at this point, considering that he's sitting here doubting the abilities of the United States when we can clearly beat the Russians with just a fraction of our military forces involved in an actual conflict. It's stupid to me. And I don't like the guy at all. So I hope that addresses that fairly well, James. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, really cool to hear you're just from north of Atlanta. That must mean you're in the Buckhead area, or Marietta up here. That's like the general area just north of Atlanta where it seems almost everyone lives. But still, really cool to have you on tonight. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address your question fairly well about this McGregor guy. Honestly, if you hear anything from him, I would dismiss it with a grain of salt. And also, let me just move over here real quick, because there is something fairly interesting to note about this guy. What's his first name, Matthew? James McGregor?
I think it's Douglas McGregor.
Douglas McGregor.
And I want to say this real quick. I have nothing personal against the guy, and also he was in the military, so, you know, obviously thank him for his service. But I disagree with him strongly on his analysis. There's no way in hell that Russia is going to steamroll Ukraine like he's saying. If that was the case, this war would not have gone on for an entire year. So I know he went to West Point, I do believe. He went to some really good college. Yeah, West Point, University of Virginia. But I have to say he's completely wrong on the Ukraine situation.
I would say he's completely wrong with it. I would also have to say it's nothing personal against this guy, but I don't know what kind of Kool-Aid he's drinking, because it's obvious the Russians would never win in a war. In fact, this guy led 49 fighting vehicles in the battle, I believe, of 73 Easting, and didn't suffer a single casualty, and that was going up against, at the time, Russia's best tech, T-72Bs, T-72As, and pretty much a contingent of other Soviet stuff, T-55s, T-54s, and the like. And they ended up flooring him, suffering no losses whatsoever, and he thinks, going up against that same stuff now, just operated by the Russians, which we know are about as bad off as the Iraqis would have been in the Gulf War, they would beat us in a conventional war. The guy has actual combat experience to show different. He was actually there when they beat the Soviet equipment managed by the Iraqis. And I got to remind everyone, the Iraqis of the 2000s were a completely different animal than the Iraqis of the 90s. The Iraqis of the 90s had just come out of the Iran-Iraq war and were some of the most trained and battle-hardened forces the world over, and were one of the largest armies in the world, using some of the most advanced Soviet technology and equipment that could be afforded at the time. And the fact that the United States went up against those forces and dominated against them proves the fact that we could have dominated against the Soviets as well in a conventional war with the kind of technology we had, going up against what the Soviets had at the time. Hell, the Iraqis had some of the most advanced jets that the Soviets had. They had MiG-29s, they had MiG-25s, and they had everything that the Soviets would have used as their frontline aircraft in a Cold War gone hot. And we beat the hell out of everything. There was no question about it. And he was there to witness this. He was there in the field, and now he's going to sit here and spin the story that the Russians would win. And that shows that this guy is talking out of his rear end. Who knows if he's being paid to say that kind of stuff or what? You know, I can't say anything about that because who knows? But the guy is talking from a ridiculous standpoint here. And for that reason, I would discredit everything he largely says about the war because it's clearly based in nothing. It's not even based in his real-life experience, which shows the complete opposite. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is from BC Skyman, who puts in a $25 donation. And thank you very much, BC, for that support. And also, if I'm not mistaken, I think BC's son is maybe putting in the super chats. I'm not really sure, but also if he is, hello to you, BC Skyman's son. He says, no winners in a nuclear exchange, but go LSA Army from Evan. And yes, it is his son. Hello, Evan.
Hey, hello, Evan, the son of BC Skyman, the OG channel legend. And I got to thank you so much for the support, and I would have to agree. There are no winners in a nuclear exchange. No winners whatsoever. And that's something to always remember, is that while everyone's always talking about moving a nuke here, moving a nuke there, if these things were actually used, it would be the end of the world as we know it. And of course, there's always a saying that goes around where Einstein said, the third world war would be fought with nuclear weapons, the fourth one would be fought with sticks and stones. Honestly, he's not that far off, really. Modern industrial abilities, as we understand it, would be completely destroyed in a nuclear exchange, and we would have to start over for probably a standpoint of the 18th century, maybe even the 17th century. And so it would be a very tough time after a nuclear exchange. The entire modern Western world would be destroyed as we know it, and would not come back probably for hundreds of years. But still, thank you so much for the support, Evan, and thank you for being a part of the Lee Spring Army, just like your dad. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Really cool to know that you're watching tonight instead of your dad, but still, that is incredibly cool. And so thank you so much once again, and we are on to the final one of this segment.
All right, and the final one of this segment goes to JC Atkins, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, JC, for the support and also being a longtime viewer. He says, you know you guys and this community rock, and take a chat question on behalf of your favorite LSA Navy NCO.
And thank you so much, JC Atkins, for the support. Of course, the LSA Navy NCO. And I have to say, I would have to be honest with y'all here. Let me go pull up the Royal Dutch Navy. Here we go. Royal Netherlands Navy. And let me go down here real quick. I've got to find their modern ships, because there's one ship that really sticks out to me here that I just really like. And let me find it. Here we go. It's the Holland class. Now, if the Lee Spring Army did have a navy, these little corvettes would be in that navy. I just think they look really nice.
Yeah, they look pretty cool, I gotta say. I like the color of it.
Man, I like it, man. It's a very sleek-looking ship. It kind of looks like a Type 45 Daring class from the United Kingdom, but really sized down to be a corvette. Still a really cool ship. If we did have a Lee Spring Navy, a real one, this ship would be in that fleet, because it's just a really cool-looking one. But still, thank you so much for the support, JC Atkins, of course, from the Lee Spring Navy. And thank you so much once again for being with us tonight, throwing in some kind words and support to help this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to get a live chat question as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question is going to go to, let's see here, it goes to Alan, who says, why haven't I heard talk about the reason that Russia put nukes in Belarus? Anything that happens, a coup, etc., a death of Lukashenko, etc., Russia will come in and take control because obviously there are now nukes there.
That is true. They may actually use that as an excuse to intervene in Belarus in any situation because they have nuclear arms there. But at the same time, they could equally remove the nuclear arms if a situation got bad and say for security reasons we have to remove the nuclear weapons from the country because they are in jeopardy. And it would most likely be the evacuation of the nuclear forces that would occur instead of an intervention in protection of the nuclear forces. Because even if they intervene, they most likely wouldn't be able to provide solid security for those nuclear arms in Belarus, and so they would have to be evacuated anyways. But I still think they would probably use that as an excuse to intervene militarily in Belarus if anything was to go down that was not really in Russia's favor. Belarus is really the last thing that Russia controls in the world at this point. They don't control any of the Stan series countries, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, or Kazakhstan. Almost all of these have ended up becoming indifferent or unfriendly with the Russians, and so there are very few countries left that are the Russians' friends. One is Belarus, the other is Cuba, and Venezuela. And maybe North Korea. North Korea really doesn't count though, because North Korea is just a friend of anyone who hates America. So they're just kind of like a fair weather friend. But anyways, those are the few friends they have, and this is really the only friend they have in Europe left. And so they probably would try and get involved and make sure that that friend stays alive somehow, instead of them being left completely alone with a NATO alliance spanning all the way from the border near St. Petersburg and all the way down to Volgograd in Ukraine, or Krasnodar down here. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much for the support, JC Atkins, and also allowing us to sponsor that live chat, because that is a pretty good point. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on out of this question segment and on into our Frontline news, starting in the Kremenna area. Going over the past 24 hours of Frontline updates in this area, we haven't seen a lot of changes, at least up in the northeast. As you can see, nothing has actually changed. But moving on down to the front line itself, we can see near Torske that Ukrainian forces were repelling an assault in this area. We hear them firing their machine guns into the distance in a firefight with Russian infantry. You see something exploding outside of the dugout. It appears to have been a Ukrainian firing an AT-4. We still see them firing out of the opening. We see them still lining up the Russians. The firefight is going on strong with explosions occurring near the trench line, and the Ukrainians still firmly hold the position. You see another explosion of an artillery round in front of the trench.
That is extremely close.
That was extremely close, and these guys are still hanging in and making sure to hold that position as best they can. And from what we can tell, the Russians have not been able to make an advance in that area over the past 24 hours. Moving on from that area and down towards Bakhmut, I also have to make the note that today we haven't seen Deep State UA update the map. This map is actually from yesterday, and so as far as we understand, according to Deep State, there has been no advances on the front line today, at least at the moment, until they update the map. But in the Bakhmut area, of course, the arrows of advance that we have right now are still the exact same arrows of advance that are occurring today, and have been occurring for about the past 3 days. Moving up to the area of Rostolivka, we saw that the K2 battalion was hitting Russian forces in between Solidar and Seversk. Whip out the typewriter, bled. I don't know what it's saying.
Oh, yeah, they even got the bell with it and everything.
In this video, there are 6 servicemen, 137th Parachute Regiment of the 106th Division of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. Evacuate the senior of their group. During the evacuation is watched by a Scout K2 battalion drone. Meanwhile, the crew kamikaze drone prepares a gift and is catching up with the occupiers. So there's our description of the video. Whip out the accordion, Vadim. We're about to have a slaughter. I mean, you see the Russians in a little group. The group commander is being evacuated. Uh-oh.
Oh, dear. And Jaws is closing in.
Dum dum. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, there they are again. And here comes the drone, and...
Oh, they heard it coming.
Oh!
Oh, they scattered.
Oh!
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
my lord!
Gracious.
Goodness me. Well, let's say there's
It
going to
ended
be...
up going after that one unlucky guy.
Yeah, one very unlucky guy. But with that, that's the end of that clip. And as you can tell, there will now be 2 people that need to be evacuated. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip where we saw a Mista S being destroyed far behind the lines in Bakhmut. And we hear the cheering.
What the hell?
Man, they going ham up in here. Another Mista S destroyed. Another $3.5 million SPG that is now nothing more than rubble. Moving on down into the area of Dnipro, we also saw the remains of Scooby-Doo. I hate to tell y'all, but an unfortunate thing happened. Of course, many of y'all know that Scooby-Doo and the gang are nothing more than a group of young pioneers. And I'll show y'all this really quickly. Scooby-Doo van. Oh, nope. Scooby-Doo. Let me just go get the original images. Alright. Of course, we've gone through this before, but I have to explain this to everyone once more. This is probably the best side profile we have from here. You can see right here a very distinct kind of outfit that Freddy here is wearing. And many people have always just said, oh, well, you know, he just dressed a little flamboyantly, you know, with the ascot and everything. Well, it actually turns out he's a young pioneer. I'll show y'all right here.
I love this little shtick right here.
Yeah, and we can see the young pioneers right here in all their glory. Same blue pants, same red ascot, same clothes, same everything.
And also, he's a hippie type person.
Yeah, but no. He hangs out with hippies, which of course were associated with communism back in the 60s. But interestingly enough, he doesn't really have a lot of hippie tendencies about himself. He's very put together, very ingenuitive, very creative, just like a role model young pioneer in the Soviet Union. And so, it seems as though our boy Freddy is actually a Z-bot, as some people would call him, and he's working for the commies, or more so the Russians. And so, of course, I have to lay that out to y'all so that way y'all get what's about to happen here. It appears that Scooby and the gang are actually trying to liberate, well, you know, for the Russians, it's liberate a Ukrainian village from those evil Ukrainian oppressors, and it appears that, sadly, a Ukrainian ATGM met its mark, and Scooby-Doo and the gang ended up not solving the mystery today. Like, Soing Scoob, the chassis gone. Ruh-roh, Raggy.
Ruh-roh, Raggy.
Ruh-roh, Raggy, we're going to the light. But anyways, y'all can see, the Scooby-Doo van is gone. It's just got blown away. An ATGM hit it, I believe, on the side, and that was all that there was for Scooby-Doo and the gang and Freddy the Young Pioneer. So, very unfortunate, of course, and we hate to know that such an iconic group of American cartoons, such as Scooby-Doo and the Gang, or more so Freddy the Young Pioneer and Gang, appears to have met their unfortunate end. This has also been made canon, by the way, in Scooby-Doo lore. They've ended up meeting their end on the front line near Bakhmut. But moving on from that little clip and on to the front line itself, we saw the 3rd Brigade, of course, engaging in normal fighting in the area. We can hear the sound of the APC's engine as the column moves through the field. We'll now see the Ukrainians advancing into the tree line. Now I see the Ukrainians moving around quite quickly. And we now hear that the sniper was shooting at him in the field when they unloaded from the APCs earlier.
Да. Ну, все полегали. Она вот так вдоль. А горячий воздух пошел, понял, полностью так.
Какой должен был? Холодный, блядь? Я нахуй шо, блядь?
А он встает, понял? Вот так вот тупо, вот просто выглядывает в секунде. Ебать, он разворачивается на жопу вот так, понял? И вот так вот хуяк. И кровь с носа, понял?
Да, блядь, слава богу, что это самое худшее.
Не, так я думаю, ну все, понял.
Ждем еще.
Да. Угу.
Unfortunately, I don't really know what they're talking about right here, but one of them just said that one of their posteriors was quite scary.
Нормальник у тебя, конечно, был страшный.
Бля, если тебе это хуй.
Не, я просто, блядь, хуево, так и сразу не понял, баран ты чи не.
А у нас тоже, блядь, прилетел, сука, кусок, блядь, ебаного василька на место, где только вышли сидел. Ой, я не бачу, что ты раскидываешь.
Поэтому он...
Хорошо, что в окоп сошел.
With that, that's the end of the clip, but showing a little bit of the 3rd Brigade in action today. I honestly don't know what that conversation was about, but still very interesting. At the moment, we understand that the 3rd Brigade is currently pushing directly along the canal, well, actually north from the canal zone, seen here. And they are pushing north towards Klishkivka and also into Kurtimivka as well. Hopefully, we'll see that they make some success if they are able to take the town of Kurtimivka. We're assuming that this left flank will probably start to collapse at a far faster rate than it has been. And so one can only hope. We're now going to be moving on out of the Bakhmut area and all the clips that we saw there, and on down into the direction of Marinka, where we saw a Ukrainian T-64 BV working on some Russian positions. And Chad music ensues. Boom, 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 boom. And we can see the T-64.
Man, I'm telling you.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. We see the T-64 BV rolling up to the Russian position. And now we can see them lining up the gun and firing it here in a moment. Be patient. And there we go. Nice shot. Hey, man, I think I just saw someone in the live chat. You may know who they are.
Hey! Let's go.
And we can now see the T-64 BV continuing to fire in the tree line. It appears that it's not supported by infantry. It is attempting to break up Russian forces before the main Ukrainian infantry push makes it here later. That may be the plan, or it may be operating on its own just to wipe out Russian forces and then retreat off of the line. The T-64 BV continues to fire into the tree line, and we can see that it's just trying to get a good even spread of the entire area, wiping out the trench.
They're really putting some work in on this one.
Man, they are doing, like, call this Papa John's because this is the works right here. I mean, I've never seen a tank shell a trench this thoroughly before. This thing is unloading the entire ammo supply that it has into this one trench. I mean, man, the guys in this trench must be getting it right now. I mean, like, it is rough. We now see a little clip of the trench there and a bird flying through. That actually almost scared me there. And we now see the T-64 BV rolling away from the position, now having thoroughly tenderized the Russians in the area. And it appears that another T-64 BV is coming up for its turn on the trench as well. Oh, wait a minute. We got a group of infantry here moving out of this tree line towards the T-64. These may actually be Ukrainian infantry. Let me make sure. Let's see. Approach the position of Russian occupiers. Intensively works the enemy trenches with high explosive. So I believe these may be Ukrainian infantry. This is a Ukrainian tank after all. And it appears that some Ukrainian infantry may be climbing on board to have a ride. And we can see that that's the case. Tank's now on the move.
Tank's really starting to book it.
Man, that tank is booking. It's almost leaving the infantry behind. The infantry are in a high trot right now trying to keep up. Man, actually, the infantry's not keeping up. That tank is way outpacing them. They said, driver, forward. He just went, oh, okay. He just started going at like 20 miles an hour. But anyways, the driver is continuing to move up towards the Russian position with a couple of infantry riding on the engine bay. And they're reaching the Russian positions again with a small amount of infantry. We can see a guy running through the position here. Can't really tell if he's a Russian at this moment.
He looks sus.
We can see the tank taking particular interest in these guys. We can see a little puff of smoke there. The tank may be firing its machine gun right now. Can't really tell. We can see the tank rolling right up to the position. It does appear that it may be firing its machine gun at the trench at the moment. Dude, that tank is rolling up on that trench going, well, what do we have here? It's just like rolling right up onto it, and the rest is like, oh, блядь, run for your life.
Looks like it's on the verge of getting stuck.
Oh, well, it's going to be unstucking the Russians from their positions, that's for sure.
Damn, it's letting loose on them.
Man. Dude, imagine the noise from that thing being that close to it. Like, that would be terrifying alone. And it's just looking around. Oh, the artillery's been called in.
Yikes. They might want to get unstuck and moving fast.
Well, it looks like they just did unstick themselves. Can't really see if the infantry that was following the tank has made it up here. It appears that they actually didn't. And the infantry that was riding on the back of the tank may have unloaded a little bit earlier. Actually, never mind. We can see what appears to be maybe 2 guys right here. We can see the tank still taking its time, cleaning out the Russian position.
That tank's really going fast.
That tank...
Is that reverse?
No. What it did is it turned the hull around, as you can see, and so the driver's facing this way, so it's going forward, but the turret is turned 180 degrees to the rear.
I was about to say, I started seeing French flags pop up all over the place. I was thinking, is that a French tank?
Dude, my boy be kicking it. They were putting that thing in high gear. And we now see it looking at the Russian position. We haven't seen another artillery shell fall rather than one of them. So it appears that the Russians have now met their artillery quota for the day. They fired 1 shell, that's it. They got to wait tomorrow for another one. And it's still taking care of that position. And we now see some infantry once again crawling out of the literal woodworks here to climb on the tank. And now it's taking them on out of the area. Wait a minute. Nope, it's returned again. It's returned for the 3rd time now.
Man, it's returned. Hungry for more.
Dude, this tank is going, man, I can't get enough of this. This is great. All you can eat buffet. And it's still just ripping apart Russian positions, and nobody's stopping this thing. No Russian has any AT weapons to destroy this tank with, so it's just free to do whatever it really wants. And so now it's finally rolling off after having attacked the trench 3 times over now, and even brought half of an infantry squad to it, and now it's finally leaving the area. And right in time...
That's one thing you never see the Russians doing is anything really ballsy like that. Like, the Ukrainians just don't care. They'll keep coming back time after time. The Russians would go run the other way as fast as they could.
Well, you know, the few times they do anything ballsy like that, the Ukrainians are prepared for what is silliness like that, and they whip out an AT weapon and blow it up right on the trench. So, you know, you don't really get to see the ballsiness last too long for the Russians, because the Ukrainians are well better equipped than the Russians ever are. But still... a little bit of a breakthrough there, and very funny to see, you know, and of course funny in a bit of a morbid way, that the Russians never are well equipped enough to actually deal with a tank. The tank can roll right up onto them, and rather than them having some grenades and small arms, there's nothing they have in an entire platoon to deal with the Ukrainian tank. So they just have to sit there and get blown away, and there's no one around, or nothing around, to really help them out to stop that. But moving on to our next news, in Olenivka, we saw some Russian equipment being destroyed here, and it appears that an entire artillery battery may have gone up in flames. Alright, cool. We're gonna mute that. And we can see the artillery landing right on the road near this tree line. And we actually know exactly where this is, funnily enough. You know, so quick, Matthew, laugh.
Huh?
Alright, so that was the funnily enough part. And we're gonna be moving right down here. And what we're looking at is a group of Russian vehicles that is right here. And because if we go back to this, you can see the 2 tree lines here in this grain silo area, and you can see the grain silo area right there, and this is where the Russian forces are in this clip. So we actually know exactly where these guys were. In case of y'all are wondering, yes, I did have to play GeoGuessr off stream to figure all that out, because no one told me, so I just went and saw it was near Olenivka and went, oh, look, we can find exactly where that is, and so I went and found it. Please clap. But we can now see the Russian artillery still being blasted by the Ukrainian artillery in the counter battery. Ooh, oh, that was a good one. Yikes, that one's gone for good. It was a direct hit. When you see the artillery landing right outside the tree line, that may have been a little bit of an inaccurate hit. Well, the next one was far more accurate. And the third one's even more accurate, falling right inside the tree line. That was literally walking it in. Each shot was just walking it right onto its target. And we now see the smoking Mr. S in there. Once again, food for the worms. Well, actually, worms don't eat steel. What the hell would that be food for, Matthew? Food for the scrap man. He's going to be making
Damn,
cash.
the scrap man.
Dude, the scrap man.
I guess depending on the worms that we're dealing with here, they could chew through steel.
Dude,
I don't know what kind of worms they have in Ukraine.
Bring those Chernobyl worms down there. Let them have a crack at it. They'll probably eat it. But moving on from that and on down into the area of Volodar, we also saw that the conditions for the 72nd Brigade, the Russian 72nd Brigade, are quite poor. Here they are talking about their conditions as they sit in the middle of a basement with nothing around. We start like this. Show it to me. Here. Is everything okay? No. We are in shock. 25 people are sitting in this effing cage as a shock. We were brought here from the hospital to be cured. To be cured, to be recovered. To be recharged. 25 people in the same queue. Toilet once every 2 days, or once a day. To be recharged. We were brought here after the hospital. They don't give us anything. They don't give us anything to cure. They don't pay attention to the medical care. They don't keep us in the basement. They don't let us go anywhere. Here is the second team. They're going to take us away. The brave meat team. We came back. We were thrown into the basement to make it worse. They are saying that we are effed to make you more brave. They are feeding the Russian army. The Russian guys are being fed so that we don't fall down. There are 5 people in this place. It's effing crazy. They don't let us call our relatives. They don't let us call anyone. Look, I'll show you. You still have it. They met me. Because I bought a car for myself. I bought a car for myself, by the way. I bought a car without asking for it. It's all healed. My legs are all black. You know, Matthew, hang on. I gotta go back and reread this part about the car. Because for some reason, this just crossed my mind. They met me. Oh, man, because I bought a car for myself. Oh, man, I'm telling you, I bought a car for myself. I bought a car without asking for it. Oh, man. It's all healed. My legs are all black. I won't undress.
Is this translation correct?
I think so. It's effed up. Save us, please. Look how the 72nd Brigade is coming. I would say that the 72nd Brigade is our Red Bandit Brigade that is going to take us to the hospital. Save us. Save us. We don't have enough money. We have a room here. We have 4 beds for 25 people. Here you go.
Looks like I got dinged up a little bit.
We sleep in turns. We sleep in turns for 3 hours. We promise to pay the rent. They pay us. We don't have any medical care. We don't have any connections. Look at the wall. I have a hole in my neck from a shell. And also what he's pointing out on the wall is the excessive amount of mold growing inside of it. But with that, that's the end of the clip. And you can see right there, the 72nd Brigade is not having a fun time at all with the conditions of the wounded. It appears they're being put into basements, and no one's really caring for them or looking after them, and they just lock them into this basement and tell them they're going to be cured and recover eventually, but apparently that never comes. Moving on out of the Volodar area, however, and towards Staromanivka, Ukrainian fighting still occurs in this area, but we have not seen any notable frontline advances over the past 24 hours. However, we did see a Russian truck turning into a toaster, and I'll show you all that right here. But this thing ain't baking bread. This thing is baking up losses. Take a look. Toasty. In our next clip, we also saw that another Russian tank appears to have had an uneventful time, and it appears to have turned into a toaster as well. Any minute now. Here we go. And I wish I could play that. But here's the Russian tank. It is a T-62MV, or T-62BV, so it has explosive reactive tiles put onto it. See it driving. Oh, what's that? Why, it's mines on the road. Do they care? Nah. Watch and learn.
Floor it.
Ooh.
Oh, jeez. And it worked just as it was designed.
Oh, that thing's done for. And we can see that some of the crew, actually, it looks like all of the crew survived somehow, but the tank is done for. And we can see smoke coming out of the cab, so the cab has been punctured, there's something on fire in there, and the tank will probably detonate and explode a little later. Also, by the way, did I tell y'all that this is a T-62? They're actually using these on the front line now as main battle tanks, and this is becoming a very common sight in the southern front right now.
It held up all right for an old antique.
Dude, that thing fell apart like a Looney Tunes car, though. I mean, like...
Oh, yeah, I know.
Oh,
That
my
one was shocked.
Man, I honestly think they're probably dazed. And we can still see that 3 crew members are still around the tank. One of them just took off, though. He's disappeared. Oh, wait, no, there's the 4th crew member. He's out there in the ditch. And these 2 guys over here are still taking care of their stuff. Man, that thing is gone. I've never seen an explosion that strong on a little tank like that for an anti-tank mine. That thing looks like it pretty much did blow up just from the mine hitting it. And of course, this thing is probably going to brew up and burn on out. It's completely destroyed already, though. It's just that the destruction will, of course, proceed to be worse and worse as the fire then rages inside of the tank. But it didn't end up well for them, and of course the Russians are still losing a pretty decent amount of vehicles. Moving on over to the Wheelopole area, we did see a Ukrainian soldier taking care of a wild boar. Very cute.
Oh, it's a baby boar.
Look at that baby boar.
With a hurt leg, I think.
That boar is cute.
Man, those things are actually pretty cute when they're small, but they get big and they turn vicious.
Man, they turn scary. It's a little itty-bitty killing machine. That's in the trench.
Yeah. You know those people that go get, like, lion cubs and stuff, and they're all sweet when they're small, and then they maul them when they get older?
Uh-huh. Now, that will happen with a boar, though. Like, that will happen every time with a boar. It's good to know they're taking care of it, but honestly, when this thing gets just a little bit older, they need to send it back into the wild again, because those things are very aggressive, just naturally. But no one can deny the boar piglets are cute. And listen to the little thing, it's drinking the water. Can we keep it? Can we keep it? Okay, we can keep it. 1 year later, ends up goring the entire family. But anyways,
man, I see that thing, and I think the cut bacon, we're having it for breakfast tomorrow.
Man, and the bacon's really tender when it comes from the piglets. Oh, dear. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, everyone. But it is a very cute little boar. With that, we're going to be moving on into our next clip where we saw a T-62, another one that was in use as a main battle tank on the front line, being blown up by an FPV drone and causing a significant explosion. Here it is. Here's the FPV drone hitting it. There's the tank from the distance, and oh, it's gone.
Oh, dear. Oh, we're going to see it again.
Dang. Right now, Christopher Nolan's going, see, the audience can really feel it. But anyways, that was a pretty big explosion. I don't think there's anything left of that T-62. And once again, that's what you get for bringing forward a 50-year-old, 60-year-old tank to the battlefield. Moving on from that and on into the direction of Robotyne, we also heard the Ukrainians are still continuing the advance here, but of course we haven't seen any frontline updates as of today. However, we did see a whole bunch of clips. For example, a Russian tank being destroyed by artillery. And we hear the epic drum music ensue. There's the first artillery round hitting. There's the second one. Third time's the charm, everyone. Third time's the charm. Watch this drive. Oh, never mind. It's all on fire. The second one was the charm. And the tank's going up right over here. And that thing is going up tremendously.
Jeez.
Dude, what do you call it when you get a shed and you put a burning tank inside of it? You call that thing a Russian pressure cooker. And look at that thing go. Man, oh my lord. It burned
down. The whole thing down.
Oh my lord. And dang, they even saw that from a distance. Well, that's impressive. Moving on into our next clip, we also saw a Ukrainian BTR firing at the Russians. And by the way, everyone, Y'all may be interested to know this. This isn't a BTR-80, by the way. This is a BTR-60. But I was looking at these little scout cars today because I was very interested in them. The BRDM2s. Y'all may remember these from very early on in the war. These were actually used a lot by everyone, but we've been seeing them less and less. These little things are scout cars of the Soviet army, now the Ukrainian and Russian armies. And they're pretty interesting. They have a 14.5 millimeter machine gun mounted on top, and it's pretty much just an armored car. It's really just an armored car that's used for scouting. I found out today that you can buy one of these things for $10,000 in running order. I didn't know that they were that cheap. But I was really interested in that. I was really intrigued because I was like, a BRDM is only $10,000 US. You can get one that's actually road legal for $10,000.
We could put an enforcer wrap on it and drive it down the street and look like crazy people.
I'm not going to lie. Like, knowing that this thing is only $10,000, it is pretty neat to think about. But at the same time, why wouldn't we get something a little bit cooler, like a ferret? And let me show you a ferret scout car, and there we go. Like this little thing. It's a British scout car. Honestly, I think it looks cooler. You know, that's just me.
I mean, it looks all right.
I mean, all right. It's not really the greatest thing out there, but it is an armored car, and that is pretty neat in its own right. Also, okay, now I'm not going to lie, that one is a lot cooler.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty neat.
But you know what would be really cool?
Well, a whole tank.
The thingamabob.
Oh, Rhodesian. Oh, dear Lord. Get that off the screen.
I want one of them.
Man, I wouldn't pay anything for this. You'd have to pay me to, like, take this thing home.
All right, fellas, it's Mad Max in Africa. That's in the 1970s.
Somebody's like, would you like to buy this fine vehicle from me? I'd be like, yeah, sure, you can pay me $500 and I'll take it off your hands.
Dude, I wish that Australian guy that went, oh yes, I see you know your judo well. I wish he drove one of those things so that way he could be hopping in that while the cops are trying to arrest him, going, oh yes, I see you know your judo well. Ta-ta, and then he just goes driving off. I mean, honestly, for some reason that would be a hilarious image to me. Anyways, moving on from the interesting side note, these BTR-80s, you know, because this is the whole roundabout thing I was about to say here, these BTR-80s, well, BTR-60s actually, I found some of them for sale as well, and they're not that much more expensive. These things are $20,000. This one right here, in that exact condition pretty much, with a running engine, is only $20,000. And I
know there's a reason why it's priced at $20,000.
Well,
This thing should be worth a lot more. Jeez, man, this thing should be worth at least $100, but it's selling it for $20. Nobody wants it.
That's true. But still, it is pretty wild to think how cheap these armored personnel carriers really are. At least the really old Soviet ones. You can get these things at a dime and quarter store at this point, nearly, because of how cheap they are. But anyways, I was just wanting to share that with you all because I was looking around at that today, and I was just really blown away by how cheap these things get. But yeah, I just want to share it with y'all because it blew me away that they were that cheap. Anyways, here's some Ukrainian BTRs firing at Russian positions. Man, they hit that tree lemon and it automatically started some music. I don't know how that works. But now the BTRs have rolled up. We now see them turning the turret. And we now see them lining up the gun and starting to fire it. This isn't as big as a BTR-80's gun. A BTR-80 would have a 30mm autocannon. This is only a 14.5mm machine gun, heavy machine gun. I believe it's an MVT. But it still has a decent whopper of firepower behind the thing. It's just not going to be as strong as your other kinds of APCs, like a BTR-80. We now see the BTRs having to turn around, and we can see this is proving to be a little bit of an obstacle due to their absolute length. Man, those reverse gears, though. I've never seen anything reverse like that was made in the Soviet Union. This thing actually has, like, 2 reverse gears on it, I think. We now see them continuing to fire at the Russians. They just had to turn the turret all the way around. They're looking over the back of the APC right now. We see them continuing to fire as they now finally get out of the area. And we can now see them taking a picture on top of the BTR. Pretty
Like a
cool.
little selfie for posterity.
They're just like, haha, we got him. But it's like, anyways, with that, we're going to be moving up for that little clip and on towards Robotine, where we saw that the Russian tank just ended up blowing up. They actually got hit by an ATGM, but we're going to say it just blew up. Here's the clip. There's the tank, and it's gone.
All right.
What the hell was that, Matthew? You went,
I don't even know. I was about to say something, then I stopped.
Dude, that thing blew up, and Matthew went, "Arr." Man,
Rawr.
Dude, the Ukrainians be sitting there going, grr, to blow that thing up. But anyways.
Oh my.
Oh my. But anyways, they blew that thing up sky high. We can see they also got a supply truck earlier on in the day. Very nice. Moving on from that, we also saw them using a Leopard 2A6 on the front lines, and they actually were able to get themselves a little kill. Here's the clip. When you see the Leopard 2A6 firing right there. And we can now see its target, which is that Russian tank, I believe, right there, if that is the tank. Nope. Oh, wait a minute. Let me go find the tank. I think it's right here. The Leopard 2A6 did hit it, though. I can't even really tell if that's a tank or not, because it's really hard to tell. But with that, that's the end of the clip, and we can see that the Ukrainians are using those Leopard 2s to great effect. Moving on from that and on into the area of Stepove, near Lobkove and Piatki, Hakhti. I know I got that wrong. I'm so sorry, everyone. But we saw something really neat. A Leopard 2A4 that was busted up. But the story behind this busted up Leopard 2A4 is something truly fantastic. And something really unbelievable. This is from the 29th of June, which is yesterday, but we got the pictures today. Damaged Ukrainian Leopard 2A4 hit a anti-tank mine, then got hit on the upper frontal part, right here. That's why you see this burn mark near this area. But it apparently did not penetrate the upper glacis of the tank nor the turret. And then they tried to finish it off with a Lancet drone, and the Lancet then hit towards the rear part of the tank, and it doesn't really appear to have caused serious damage beyond the engine bay. So they could possibly roll this thing off the lines. It'll take a lot of work, though. I will admit the damage to this thing is moderate. But with a decent bit of work, this thing may end up running again on the front lines and being used by the same Ukrainian tank crew that ended up having to abandon it. But this kind of damage being sustained by a tank and this many hits would have resulted for a Soviet-era tank to be completely destroyed. Soviet-era tanks are just generally more fragile. And based off of these pictures, we can see a hit. It appears that it was right here to the upper glacis that the tank survived. It most likely then ricocheted and hit the turret, which it also survived. We can also see that it hit an anti-tank mine, which it survived, but it was demobilized, so it was abandoned. And then a Lancet hit it on the engine bay, which caused the engine bay to burn, but it didn't spread into the crew compartment and burn the tank out completely. So it is entirely possible this thing is reusable. Of course, I have to say this, though, it will take a decent amount of effort to get this thing reusable again. But it's still interesting to see one can refurbish it. So, once again, Western tech is proving to be a little bit more robust than Soviet tech. But moving on out of that, and on down into the town of Berdyansk, we also saw in Berdyansk some explosions, or at least heard reports of explosions at the Berdyansk airfield. Locals reported up to 11 explosions and multiple helicopters fleeing Berdyansk airport this morning. At the start of June, there were 25 Russian helicopters on the Berdyansk apron, including 5 Ka-52s, 9 Mi-8s and Mi-24s, 13 Ka-29s. Also, y'all have never seen these things, I bet. They're ugly. This is a Ka-29. It's so ugly. This is the...
Jeez. The proportions are all out of whack. It's too short in the rear. It looks like it would probably flip over or something in midair.
Dude, the Russian designer that made this thing said, "Look at my baby." And then they looked over at it and this thing was going, "Kill me! I'm suffering!" This thing is terrible looking. I hate these things. They're just so stupid. And the Russians worship these things because they're really the only helicopter they can use in the Navy off of the Kuznetsov. So they worship this thing. They act like it's a great helicopter. This thing is honestly dog water garbage. I've never seen a helicopter that is this ugly, and I also think it has some issues. Like, obviously, it has issues, but it has some really bad issues from what we've been told. It's just freaking ugly. Anyways, they had 13 of these things at this airfield, and they reported that all of them started to flee after explosions were heard from the airfield. So, of course, great to hear, but we'll be waiting for more picture and video evidence to confirm what kind of destruction and damage was caused at the Berdyansk airfield. Moving on out of that, however, we have to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on the 492nd day of the war. And so, here's the speech.
Speech.
And he has a long one tonight. You know what that means, Matthew. Snack.
Time for water.
Time for water and snacks and everything.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Провів сьогодні засідання Ставки, тривале та дуже детально щодо кількох питань. Доповідали главком, командувачі і щодо загальної оборонної ситуації, і щодо конкретних напрямків нашої оборони та наших наступальних дій. За цей день також маємо просування вперед на всіх напрямках наших активних дій. Розглянули на Ставці постачання боєприпасів для артилерії, для Сходу, для Півдня. І хоч вже на максимумі наша робота з партнерами заради снарядів для українських воїнів, зробимо її ще активнішою. Посилення нашої артилерії – очевидний пріоритет, і всі міжнародники отримали сьогодні додаткові завдання. Окремо розглянули ситуацію на півночі, зокрема на території Білорусі. Були доповіді нашої розвідки, ГУР, зовнішньої розвідки, розвідки прикордонників, доповідь керівника СБУ. Дуже уважно аналізуємо кожен факт і будь-які перспективи по всім напрямкам. Рішенням Ставки головкому Залужному та генералу Наєву доручено посилити північний напрямок, щоб гарантувати спокій. Є відповідні терміни виконання. Дякую сьогодні Данії та особисто пані прем'єр-міністр Метте Фредеріксен за новий оборонний пакет для України. Снаряди для артилерії, ракети для ППО, техніка для розмінування. Дякую. Провів сьогодні кілька змістовних підготовчих нарад, як щодо внутрішнього контексту в нашій державі, відповідних внутрішніх заходів та і щодо міжнародних заходів. Починається надзвичайно важливий період зовнішньої політики. Це робота заради розширення миру через розширення наших безпекових можливостей, наших альянсів і співпраці. Наступні тижні будуть надзвичайно активними, і позиції нашої держави чітко визначені. Всі наші посадовці знають, що робити. Ще одне. Сьогодні перша річниця звільнення Зміїного від російських окупантів. Це одна з найвагоміших наших перемог. Пам'ятаєте, минулого року навесні ніхто не очікував від України, що ми зможемо реалізувати, зокрема, і це фундаментальне оборонне завдання – дати безпеку Зміїному, а отже, значній частині Чорноморської акваторії. Але наші воїни це зробили. Російським терористам потрібен був Зміїний, щоб знищити увесь південь нашої країни, нашу прекрасну Одесу і інші міста. Наші воїни їх зупинили, вигнали зі Зміїного. Україна і українці значно сильніші, ніж будь-хто думає про нас. Іноді сильніше, ніж ми самі про себе звикли думати. Завдяки усьому тому, що нашим людям вдається робити в протистоянні з російськими терористами, ми відкриваємо для усього світу та й для самих себе нову українську силу, справжню українську силу. Силу, яку ми ніколи не втратимо, яка завжди буде опорою безпеки вільного світу. Я вдячний усім, хто звільнив Зміїний, ГУР разом з іншими складовими сил оборони і безпеки нашої держави провели цю операцію. Головне управління розвідки та спецпідрозділ Альфа СБУ, військово-морські сили та армійська авіація, командування сухопутних військ, авіація повітряних сил та наші міцні прикордонники. Дякую. І завжди будемо пам'ятати наших героїв, наших воїнів, які віддали своє життя заради цієї української перемоги. Із тих, чиї імена зараз можна назвати. Бійці ГУР. Руслан Попов, Герой України, капітан першого рангу. Олег Зайцев, Герой України, молодший лейтенант. Віталій Ігнатенко, Герой України, солдат. Бійці Альфа СБУ. Володимир Кисельов, Герой України, капітан. Олександр Крикуненко, Герой України, майор. Воїни військово-морських сил. Ігор Бедзай, Герой України, полковник. А також Михайло Заремба, майор. Сергій Мущицький, капітан. Юрій Пирог, штаб-сержант. Вічна пам'ять. Вічна пам'ять і слава усім, хто віддає своє життя, щоб жила наша прекрасна Україна. Слава Україні!
And here I'm Slava.
And Slava Ukraini. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 492 of the news. And that is the beginning of many questions that y'all have been asked throughout the course of tonight's stream. Many of y'all have been subjected to tests and many questions in the live chat. Many of y'all have answered the stimulus quite interestingly. We would like to go over how that stimulus has been answered and what kind of answers were given. And so, with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping right back into our polls, our very first one says, Ukraine says the order has been issued for the Russian FSB to kill Prigozhin, but the timeline is unclear. And what are your thoughts? 50% said Putin will kill Prigozhin soon, meaning later. 24% said Putin will kill Prigozhin now. 14% said unsure, and 12% said, I doubt the order is real. And I don't doubt for 1 second that order has probably been issued. However, what we don't know is when that's going to be carried out. They could be planning for it because I'm sure that they're going to have to find some clever way to get to him. I think they'll probably get to him soon. Probably not right now because I think they'd be crazy to do that because they'd turn him into a martyr. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say they're not going to do it now. They're probably going to do it in several months, maybe even a year from now, because they got to make sure all the media attention dies off of them. So with that, I hope that does address that, in my opinion, fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says, today another cyber attack disrupted satellite communications for Russia's military, and who's behind it? It looks like 31% said the Wagner cyber army, 31% also said the Ukrainian cyber army, 25% said unsure, and 13% said it might have been a NATO member, ? And one option I did leave off here is it could have been an independent hacking group, but sadly I'm only allotted 4 options on the poll. For me, I would say it's probably the Wagner cyber army. We saw the other day that some satellite ISP in Russia had been taken down for some time, and we also speculated that that could have been Wagner behind that one as well. So it's kind of unclear, but my bet is it's Wagner. But Enforcer, what say you?
My bet would also be that it's Wagner or a very heavily Wagner-related group because it appears that the coup hasn't really ended as far as the cyberspace goes. And Wagner-affiliated forces are still attacking the Russian government through there, and most likely will not stop until they're caught, and that probably will never happen. And so with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, today a Russian national carried out a terror attack at a Moldovan airport, and is Russia behind it? 55% said yes, Russia is trying to destabilize the country. 24% said he was probably acting solo. 15% said unsure, and 5% said no, Russia was probably not behind it. And I would speculate that Russia probably was behind that attack. We've heard many reports of people saying that Russia is going to try to destabilize Moldova to try to disrupt that country. I think Russia is going to try this strategy. They're going to, for example, send the Russian warships to Taiwan to try to create a problem over there. They're going to try terror attacks in Moldova to disrupt that situation. And they're going to do as much stuff as they possibly can to distract from what's going on in their country, which is basically a mutiny. And it's still ongoing, even though it's kind of died down now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're going to be causing chaos everywhere, and that's what the Russians do best, is that they try and go in and divide people and cause chaos wherever they can, both inside of this country, outside of this country, and everything in between. So I would agree. They're most likely going to be doing that to try and distract or to try and make it seem like the problems at home inside of our own countries are so serious we can't really focus on anything outside of our country, or other countries for that matter. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last and fourth poll says, the U.S. says Ukraine's counteroffensive has fallen short, but pledges continued support. And what are your thoughts? Looks like 33% said that's good news. They keep the funding. 31% said that's good and bad at the same time. 18% said that's very bad news for Ukraine, and 17% said unsure. And I'm going to have to say, I think the U.S. is jumping the gun a little bit here. The counteroffensive hasn't been going on for that long, and I think they're coming to a very premature conclusion here. This is still ongoing. Ukraine says that they still have a big push coming soon, and I'm going to hold them at their word on that one and see if it's going to happen a little bit differently here in the future. Now, obviously, the U.S. has withheld F-16s. That would have been a huge help, so the U.S. ought to give some slack there on that one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. I think they're jumping the gun. The offensive has only been going on at this point, I believe, for around 2.5 weeks, and that is so little time. You can't even really tell if the offensive is going to pan out to be good or not. I mean, hell, they haven't even really begun to fight yet. We only know that 30% of their offensive forces have been dedicated at any given moment. Even when they said they're beginning a complete offensive, I think that number went up to 40 to 45%. It's not even half, and we're already saying that they failed, which doesn't really make any sense. So I'd have to say they've jumped the gun on that one, and we need to wait and see if the Ukrainian offensive does pan out. It's still good to hear that it's not going to affect the support they give, but still a very early conclusion to an offensive that hardly has even existed. I mean, hell, the Battle of Bakhmut went on for 9 months, I believe, if I'm correct, and then finally rounded out, and it's still kind of going on now. And we didn't really ever put out a decisive statement then until like 6 or 7 months into the battle. And now we're going to put out a decisive statement about, oh, the Ukrainian counteroffensive isn't going that well just 2 weeks in, which makes no sense. But with that, we are on to the questions.
All right, and moving back into our super chat questions. Up first, we have a $20 super chat from none other than Flash1. And thank you, Flash, very much for that support. He says, do you think if NATO went to the nuclear plant, it would give Russia a way out if it blows up to pass the blame like all the bullies like to do?
Well, I would say if they did it at that point, it would clearly be seen as some kind of reprisal against NATO trying to take control of the power plant. And if they did that with NATO forces on the way to try and secure the power plant, that most likely would invoke Article 5, as it could be considered an attack on NATO, considering a lot of the radioactive field would land in Romania, at least. And also, it would most likely irradiate NATO forces as well and be considered a direct attack upon those soldiers. And so going off of that, we get a pretty good idea. That wouldn't really work well for them. They could try it, sure. And I would say that that's not completely out of the question. But, you know, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support. I have a feeling if they tried to do that, maybe they would. It would not turn out well for them in any circumstance. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And also, I've seen that some people are beginning to bring up politics, which is a very scary thing on this channel. We have a no politics rule on this channel. We do not discuss American, well, sometimes we rarely discuss American politics, but we can take a completely nonpartisan stance on it. We are completely neutral. We also only make critiques when they apply to both sides. We do not talk about politics here whatsoever or pick sides. That is honestly quite tacky to me, considering that we are a news channel and we are here to report news, and especially news on the war in Ukraine. And it would make no sense to me to begin to talk about American politics and what's happening in the American political field, considering that regardless of your political affiliation, as long as you support Ukraine, you fall within this camp. And we're not going to have anyone come in here and start to try and shift our channel from being purely about Ukraine and try and pervert it through some kind of a political leaning. We're not going to have that whatsoever. If you're for Ukraine, you are welcome here. If you are not for Ukraine, you are not welcome here. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are from, or anything like that. We have Russians in here that support Ukraine that are actually still inside of Russia. We have both people from the left and the right on this channel, and I prefer that no one ever makes it clear what side they lean towards. It's no one's business to know what your political affiliation is in the live chat, and I don't also want to see arguments beginning to divide Ukraine war supporters because of some kind of a superficial disagreement in the background on domestic politics. So I would ask if y'all refrain from speaking of politics in the live chat, because that is a cardinal rule in this channel, is that it's forbidden. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to, let's see here, Marion Deemert, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support. And Marion said, own in Germany, Steinen, north of Basel, not one single family there who have not lost one or even two members to cancer after Chernobyl. Steinen was direct in the path of the nuclear fallout.
And that is true. And I got to thank you for the support. And it shows how severe radioactive fallout can be. Of course, I have to say this, though. I don't believe that should be held negatively against nuclear power plants and nuclear energy technology. Nuclear power, as long as it's operated safely, works perfectly fine. Nobody had even heard, for the most part, about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant until the Russians began to mismanagement when they took control of it last year. And I believe that it's important to remember those things and remember that nuclear power is only dangerous when it is terribly mismanaged, which we almost see the Russians do constantly. Moving on from that, however, it does show that this is a serious concern, and historically, from the nuclear disasters we've seen in the past, we know that the ZNPP being mismanaged is a very serious concern, and we need to have the ZNPP brought under some kind of an intervention control by the West. And I know that some people say that wouldn't be great, having neutral parties go in. Who's the neutral party going to be? It's not going to be the Chinese. It can't be the Indians. They're not going to get involved. It really can't be anyone else but the Western world. So I would have to say we need to get involved and stop that immediately, because things like that will happen again if the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant goes into a meltdown. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I completely agree on that, and I also thank you for sharing a little bit of historical information there to show how serious that this can be. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Cerny, who says, guys, a huge thanks for your contribution. It's really heartwarming to see us Eastern Europeans and Estonia to see some real clear-eyed Westerners as you two superstars. Thank you for the very high praise there. And it said, especially considering all these Ritters and McGregors.
And thank you so much for the support. And also thank you for having such high praise of us. I usually don't like to think of myself as that far above the rest. I usually just think of myself as a normal person, really. There's a lot of people in America that I've met that are very common sense, very reasonable, very sensible, that talk a lot like us. It's just that they usually don't ever get put to the forefront because they're not as sensational as, someone like McGregor. But I would have to say, as far as people like McGregor go, they're usually, what's very interesting about the modern world is that people like McGregor in the United States are actually quite few and far in between. There's not many people like McGregor that think like McGregor. However, the ones that there are, they're kind of, I guess you could say, the equivalent of a modern day freak show, because they're just so bizarre and so weird with their mindset and their thinking that they get elevated to a position of virality, pretty much, because it's such a weird mindset. To think that someone would say that the Russians could beat the United States in a conventional war is crazy enough in its own right. It draws, it turns heads when people hear a headline like that and they go, wait a minute, what did this guy say? Because it's just outrageous. And that's why this guy has gotten so much publicity, is because the statements themselves are just outrageous. And so it brings people in because they're so outraged by such a silly comment, such as that. And so I got to be quite honest with you, not really a lot of people in America are like that. Most people in America, from what I've seen, well, I would actually say about half of them are like us, and then the other half are kind of like semi-McGregors, and then maybe a quarter to 10% of them are legit McGregors. That's the best way I could put it. But I got to thank you so much for the high praise of this channel and supporting us to help us to keep this thing going, because folks like you help us to be able to run this channel, so that way we can put out what we say and what we think about the war and such things like that, and also put out the news as well. And I gotta thank you so much for having such high praise of us, because it really does blow us away when people say incredibly kind stuff like that. And so thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is from Greedo the Green, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Greedo, for that support. Hey. And he said, is there any proof that Russia is behind what's popping off in France, and what are your thoughts? And me and the Enforcer were actually discussing that earlier, believe it or not.
From what we understand, there may be some involvement of the Russians inside of France, and they may be trying to brew up these protesters, now rioters. There's no way you can say that these are protesting anymore. They're driving buses through the front of malls. That's a riot. But these rioters appear to maybe be fueled a little bit by the Russians. One thing that people don't know is that foreign countries thrive on unrest inside of Western countries. That is their bread and butter. That's really the only way they can affect us, is to try and erode us from the inside out. And the best way to do that is whenever there's civil unrest. That's why you'll see that foreign entities, such as the Chinese Communist Party or the Russian government through the FSB or third-party organizations that are loosely affiliated with the Russian government, end up coming into the United States and trying to tamper with certain groups in certain ways, fund certain people, promote certain people, and it's all indirect in the background because the attempt is to eventually try and erode the United States from the inside out and cause tensions to rise so much that the United States naturally destabilizes itself, and it doesn't really require a lot of external effort from those two countries militarily or economically. It pretty much self-destructs from the inside out, and it's heavily involved through those two countries. From what we've been hearing from the French government, I believe they're saying that something similar is happening in France right now, where Russian perpetrators are beginning to incite violence, or they are helping for violence to continue. And also, Technical Fool said rioting in France. So another Friday then. Yeah, kind of. I mean, like, rioting in France is kind of like their pastime. Like, you know, the U.S. pastime is baseball. The U.S. pastime in the United Kingdom is cricket. In France, it's riots. That's just how it works. But anyways, what they're saying is that the Russians are trying to fuel the flames in France right now, because this most likely would have been some kind of a small riot, but now it's turning into a massive riot, and it's starting to affect large parts of France. So they're saying that the Russians are possibly involved in that. It's kind of like how here in America, and you know, and this is an equal critique of both sides, you'll see that both sides get more and more extreme. And when you trace down the connections of why both sides are becoming more and more extreme, you can usually find that there's some kind of a money stream that's supporting one side or the other that is coming from outside of the country, whether it be from Russia or China is one thing or another. But it is always very interesting to note that usually there is some kind of foreign funding involved in some of the farthest extreme groups in the United States in one direction or the other. But with that,
I would take a guess that like all countries basically routinely all the time conduct cyber operations on one another. They constantly try to test systems, they'll hack into things to cause disruptions. We do it, China does it, Russia does it. I would assume that all of them all the time behind the scenes are probably funding operations to disrupt the civilian population in the country. Of course, there's no evidence of that because it's secret, but I would assume that's the case.
oh, certainly. It's a simple thing to do. It's the easiest thing everyone can do to damage each other, because think about it. It doesn't require sanctions that could be devastating to your country. It doesn't require military action, which could be devastating to the population. You could kill off many able-bodied working-age people. It doesn't require any of that. You're just sitting there meddling with their economy through a simple couple of hacks, or maybe just funding a certain group of people and getting them a little bit of notoriety in the country and causing the rise of radicalism. It's fairly easy to get these things going. It's far easier to do this than it is anything else. And so countries like the United States, Russia, and China thrive on this kind of stuff because it's really the only way that they can inflict damage on each other without outright actions.
Facts, I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah, and so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And from what we understand, there is reports that the Russians are involved in helping to further escalate the riots. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Santiago Flores, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Santiago, for that support. He said, hello. Building a Ka-52, one of last night's subjects, and I've been surprised by some crew survival and some of the Russian equipment from the videos for the fan in the studio, and cheers.
Thank you so much for the support to the fan in the studio. We will eventually have a fan in that studio, and I'll be cold. And so, actually, we already have a fan in the studio, but I do thank you so much for helping us to pay off that fan in the studio. And also, Ka-52, building a Ka-52. Building one out of Lego? There are Lego Ka-52s. That's pretty cool.
Does it have the ejection option and everything built in?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Well, maybe it does. I'm not putting it
Dang,
out.
that thing's kind of expensive. It was $675.
Whoo! Man, that's that Brickmania stuff. Let me show you all this, because I actually looked at Brickmania for a little bit. Brickmania stuff is so expensive because it's all custom made. Like, they have custom parts and everything. They even make little custom pilot minifigures and everything like that for these things. But let me go to the shop and let me show you some of the stuff. Here's some Cold War stuff right here. So they make all kinds of stuff.
Dang, this stuff's expensive as hell. This is gun money.
Yeah, I know, right? It's absolute gun money kind of stuff. But look at the quality of the models, like this F-75. Like, that is pretty cool looking. You gotta admit, you know, for a Lego.
I mean, it's cool, but I wouldn't pay that much for it. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty expensive. If you're building one of these, Your bank account must be crying right now, but it is pretty
Yes.
cool. Let's see here. World War II modern military kits. So let's see what they have for the modern stuff. Oh, they have a Ukrainian peon. That's pretty cool. It only costs as much as a real peon at $545. But it's a Super Bonker 9000?
What? Really?
What? Dude, it's Super Bonker 9000.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
How much is this one?
This one is $545.
Oh dear lord.
Man. But
I was
that
about to
is,
say we need one of those, but never mind.
oh my god, that is so cool. It is a legit, and it even has a little Napo fellas using the SPG. Now, that's crazy, because Super Bonker 9000 is actually a viewer of this channel. I don't think he's on tonight, but he actually has a peon made after him. Well, that is so cool. That is so neat. That is amazing. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a Bradley. We have a Leopard 2A6, a Ukrainian Leopard 2A6. What else do they have? A big Chungus M113. What the hell is a big
Chungus?
A big Chungus. It's just an M113, a big Chungus one. It doesn't seem to be Ukrainian though. It's just Chungus. Let's see. What else do they have? They have an Mi-17, a Ukrainian one. They have a Cossack armored car. They also have a tiny T-64BV. I mean, the thing is microscopic. They also have a Ukrainian BMP-2. Man, these things... Oh my god! This thing is $1,300.
I gotta admit that's pretty cool though. But can't you just get the bricks like from Lego and build that yourself?
No, because they actually make their own custom Lego parts for these things. Some of them you can't get from Lego. They have to custom make them in their own molds, and that's why this becomes so expensive, is because, you know, they have to kind of custom make everything. But there's the Bayraktar, and, man, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, they've got some impressive stuff on the site. What about the World War I kits? What the hell do they... Oh my lord. Wow, they have a lot of stuff. This is really impressive, I'm not gonna lie. What in the world do they have for World War II? Let's see here. There's some pretty cool stuff so far. Oh, they have a tram. That's pretty cool. They have a Soviet artillery piece. Oh.
I remember, I'm looking back here at my model case, because I have two Brickmania model sets that we were sent. I'm pretty sure that Santiago Flores sent those to us. It's the Stugna P and also the Bayraktar TB2. But I wonder, like, goodness, those must have been like $45, like, according to the price, man. Huge thanks to you, Santiago, for sending those. I had no idea they were that expensive.
Yeah, these things are unbelievably expensive. I mean, oh my lord. Oh my god! They made a little AK!
Now that's pretty sick.
That's pretty sick. It's only $5.
With plum furniture.
Yeah, with plum furniture. They need that Bakelite, though. Like, do they have a Bakelite AK? Maybe?
There's the TB2 right there. It's, oh my goodness, Santiago, why'd you send that to us, man? That is so expensive.
And there's the
I feel
Stugna.
bad. Oh my goodness.
Oh my lord, these things are so freaking expensive. Man, I thought that American healthcare was expensive. These things take the cake. Good lord.
Dang, I'm telling you.
Wait a minute, it weighs 220. Wait a minute, that's the
real
real life
one.
Stugna. Yeah, I was about to be like, there's no way in hell that weighs 229 pounds. But still, with that, how in the world do we even get onto that? I gotta be honest with you, I forgot.
Somebody, let's see what the last one was, what it said. It was Santiago. He was talking about building the KA-52.
Oh yeah, that is an expensive KA-52. Really cool though to know that you got one and you are building it. And I hope it turns out just like it does in the pictures. And I've got to thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us. And I'm got to be honest with y'all. The KA-52, as far as helicopters go in appearance, is not that bad looking of a helicopter, in my opinion at least. You know, it looks pretty neat. It's called an alligator. It looks like an alligator. So, you know, it fits the bill. It's not a bad looking helicopter. I've seen worse out there. You know, I've seen worse coming out of Iran. And I've also seen worse coming out of China. Let me show you this thing from China, the Z-19E. Oh, this thing is stupid looking.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, especially from the front like that. With these little red rocket things on the side. Thing looks like an Acme helicopter. Wile E. Coyote's going to be using this thing.
Yeah, seriously. Why does the rockets look like they're fake?
I don't know, man. That's apparently how they really look too, which is the goofiest part of it. Is look, there they are again on an actual Chinese light attack helicopter. That's just so stupid
They
looking.
could be fake. It's a Chinese attack helicopter.
I mean, what are you going to arrest me for? Enjoying a helicopter? A succulent Chinese helicopter? But anyways, that we are on to the next. But thank you so much once again for the support, Santiago, and helping this channel keep on running. And I hope we addressed that fairly well. And with that, on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Alberto Escobar. And sadly, no comment to address, but thank you very much, Alberto, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, Alberto, and helping this channel keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does help us to keep this thing rolling. And so, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Maverick Jones, who puts in a 10 and says, why even after the fall of the Soviet Union, it is Russia that still remained one of our largest rivals. Don't want to stir the pot. I'm just genuinely curious.
So the reason why the Russians remained our largest rival, well, actually, funnily enough, that's an interesting story because they actually weren't our largest rival at the collapse of the Soviet Union. We actually tried to pull them into the Western world for about the next 10 years after that, from 1991 to about 2001. We really tried incredibly hard to make Russia a part of the Western world and bring them up to speed and reform their justice system. And that's why you'll see things like Russia went and outlawed the death penalty. And that was fairly recently as well. When was the death penalty abolished in Russia? In 1996, Russia outlawed the death penalty. And the reason why they did that is because it was an attempt at the time to try and westernize the country, because Europe had outlawed completely at this point the death penalty in every single country inside of Europe. And so the Russians, in an attempt to try and get into the European Union and then later on into NATO, they also went and outlawed the death penalty as well to try and make themselves a little bit more appealing to the European Union. And so you can see a lot of things like that. They still exist to this day, actually, inside of Russia, where there were things done to make them more suitable to join the European Union. And then Putin came into charge around 2000, I believe. Let me actually check. When did Putin come into power? Let's see. Since 1999. So after Putin became president in 1999, he still showed willingness for the Russians to eventually become a part of the EU and NATO. But that started to quickly change around 2004 and 2005. During the Chechen Wars, it became clear that the Russians were not going to join NATO or the European Union any longer. And then that was completely solidified in the 2008 to 2009 Georgian War, where the Russians invaded Georgia. And then at that point, NATO membership and EU membership was completely off the table. And so the Russians weren't really a massive rival or an enemy at that point, like they were during the Cold War. We were actually trying to be friends with them that entire time until they invaded Georgia, and then they started to become our rival again, and the Russians started to posture themselves as a country to be feared and a country to actually be a rival of the United States. And at that time, U.S. analysts weren't really paying much attention to how the Russian army was performing in Georgia, at least in great detail, because they performed quite poorly compared to the Georgian forces they were fighting against, and they also performed poorly in the Second Chechen War as well. And so going off of that, we didn't really know how bad off the Russians were. And going off of everything they have on paper, you know, they have 10,000 tanks, they have 30,000 APCs, they had a massive army, and the Russian propaganda machine is an incredibly good one, up until it was disproven in reality. And so many U.S. analysts were just led to believe that the Russian nation, the Russian Federation, was as strong or possibly even stronger than it was as the Soviet Union for years. I don't know how anyone didn't catch on to that all being nothing but a fib, but that was the case. And that's why we considered, up until this war, the Russians to be a serious rival, pretty much comparing to China in terms of severity as a rival to the United States. And it was a complete oversight by the analysts and the government to think that, because if you look at the size of their GDP and then try and extrapolate that out of $1.2 trillion, they were possibly spending nearly 10 to 20% of their GDP per year on their armed forces. That's pretty silly. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much for a very good question, because that's a great one, actually. And it has a very interesting and storied past over the past 30 years up till now, and how we ended up viewing the Russians as a rival and then no longer viewing them as an actual rival. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Joshua Matkin, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Joshua, for that support. He says, if the meltdown goes, will that trigger the bombs that Russia planted?
Yes, possibly. If the reactor roofs go up in flames, the heat of that will probably be enough to detonate the bombs. But at that point, I think the bombs would be the least of everyone's concerns. The roof of the reactor coming off would probably be the biggest concern of all. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 super chat from Tom Exman, and thank you, Tom, for that support. He says, explain neutron bombs. Can they implode enough to extract radiation from Enerhodor to an area north and northeast?
I would have to be honest with you, Tom. I don't really know a lot about neutron bombs. I have heard about neutron bombs before. I don't even know if there's something that's real. So let's pull them up. And so I'll have to get all of my information here on the spot, because I don't really know much about them. But let's see here.
Is he saying to use a neutron bomb to try to extract the radiation if the power plant melted down?
I think that's what he's saying. I don't think
that's an interesting theory. I've never heard of that before.
I don't think it would work. Just me thinking about it, because while it may implode, it's not going to make the radiation disappear. So it would implode, and then it'll probably shoot it outwards, because implosions explode inwards and then they go outwards almost immediately afterwards, because there's only so much that you can compress something before it violently explodes with so much force that it negates the implosion and then it explodes. So with that, the concept was originally developed by the US in the 50s and 60s. It was seen as a cleaner bomb for use against mass Soviet armored divisions, as these would be used over Allied nations, notably West Germany. The reduced blast damage was seen as an important advantage. ERWs were first operationally deployed for anti-ballistic missiles. In this role, the burst of neutrons would cause nearby warheads to undergo partial fission, preventing them from exploding properly. For this to work, the ABM would have to explode within approximately 100 meters or 300 feet of its target. The first example of such a system was the W-66 used on the Sprint missile in the US Nike X program. It is believed that the Soviet equivalent, the A-135's 5.3 T6 missile, uses a similar design. The weapon was once again proposed for tactical use by the United States in the 70s and 80s, and the production of the W-70 began for the MGM-52 Lance in 1981, pictured here. That's also on the Chaparral, by the way. Anyways, moving on from that. This time, it led to protests as the growing anti-nuclear movement gained strength through this period. Opposition was so intense that European leaders refused to accept it on their territory. The U.S. president ordered the production of the W-70-3, which remained in the U.S. stockpile until they were retired in 1992. The last W-70 was dismantled in February of 1996. So, let's see, the basic concept. I know this is a decent amount of reading, but bear with me, everyone, because I'm also trying to learn how these things work. In a standard thermonuclear design, a small fission bomb is placed close to a target mass of thermonuclear fuel. The two components are then placed within a thick radiation case, usually made of uranium, lead, or steel. The case traps the energy from the fission bomb for a brief period, allowing it to heat and compress the main thermonuclear fuel. The case is normally made of depleted uranium or natural uranium metal. Because the thermonuclear reaction gives off extraordinarily large numbers of high-energy neutrons that can cause fission reactions in the casing material, these can add considerable energy to the reaction. In a typical design, as much as 50% of the total energy comes from the fission events in the casing. For this reason, these weapons are technically known as fission designs. And I've got to be honest with y'all, I'm kind of getting lost in the word vomit here. I would have to say it's possible, but considering that it has to be contained, this entire thing has to be contained inside of depleted uranium or natural uranium metal, we probably wouldn't be able to get enough depleted uranium or natural uranium metal to encase all of these reactors and then set off a neutron bomb in there to try and possibly mitigate the results. Also, this appears to be used against nuclear bombs, which are not similar to nuclear reactors, because a nuclear meltdown is a constant event. It's like the burning of a can of gasoline. As long as there's a gas, which for a nuclear reactor, there's practically an infinite amount of gas, it will continue to burn. With a nuclear bomb, it's like a it's like a Molotov cocktail. You throw it at something, it burns for a few minutes, and then it's done. So that would be the most similar thing I could come up with. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that addresses that the best I can, but I have a feeling that most likely would not be able to work. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So up next, we have a $10 super chat from Butchie777. And thank you very much for that support. I said, private AWOL in the UK. Here's a small donation for dog treat and pizza fund. Thanks for keeping this channel ad-free. Excuse me. Goodness. Take a question from the live chat. Slav Ukraine and Jaga Jaga.
And thank you so much for the support and the kind words as well. We will make sure to get our dogs some dog treats. And thank you so much for enjoying that this channel is ad-free. We do run ads, however, on our videos, but that's just to promote them in the algorithms. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we will make sure to get a live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And the live chat question goes to AD, who says, if any fallout falls into NATO territory from a hypothetical explosion at the power plant, would that activate NATO into the war?
It appears that it most likely would, from what we understand at the moment. It appears that NATO is saying that they would treat a situation at the power plant as an invocation of Article 5 if it affects NATO territory. I honestly think they should consider that whether it affects NATO territory or not. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and sponsoring that live chat. I hope we answered that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Badger Resistance, who puts in a 5 and says, will the explosion of the ZNPP trigger Article 5? That's very similar to that question we just answered. Yeah. And it said, and should the CIA offer Nutsack asylum to cooperate and topple Putin?
There wouldn't really be much of a way that Prigozhin could help to topple Putin, and also if the CIA kind of publicly had him aligned with the United States, it would make him look like he was a Western agent all along, so he probably would lose all standing in Russia that he had left. But I would say, what happened? Reread the line.
Will the explosion of the ZNPP trigger Article 5, and should the CIA offer Nutsack asylum to cooperate and topple Putin?
From what we understand right now, it would trigger Article 5 if a meltdown in the power plant was to happen. And so I hope that answered both of them. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, because folks like you help us to keep the lights on and everything running behind the scenes. If it wasn't for folks like y'all who supported this channel, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5 and says, take a live chat question. And of course we will, and thank you very much for that support. And the live chat question goes to Pinto Pilot, who says, do you think Russia will abandon the nuclear plant and then try to detonate it remotely?
I think that's possible. I think that's actually what we're kind of seeing right now, considering that they're telling people to evacuate and there's less and less Russian officials that are present in the area. It seems that all of them have left at this point. They may be planning on remotely detonating the power plant, and it appears that the Ukrainians are kind of suggesting that as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Surprise. It's us, who puts in a 5 and says, hello, BC Skyman's son, Evan, and hello.
And oh, hello there.
Hello.
What happened, Jack? You're thinking you're stacking spaghetti at a spaghetti store? America can be described in one word. Still, thank you for the support. Surprise is us and helping this channel to keep on running. And once again, hello to Evan, BC Skyman's son, who was here tonight. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with anyways, we're moving on to our next super chat, which goes to Wergil, who puts in a 5 and says, whole Polish army is 172,000+ strong, not 71.
All right, hang on, reread that again.
The whole Polish army is 172,000 strong and not 71.
Polish army source. Polish armed forces consists of 325,000 active duty personnel. In 2020, troop strength in 5 different branches was as follows. Land forces, 71,000 reserve, 71,000 active, 35,000 reserve. So that's about 106,200 soldiers in the Polish army. Matthew, real quick, what was the number they said in the super chat?
171,000 strong and not 71.
So I think he's actually correct, including the reservists. And so with that, Thank you so much for clarifying that for us, so that way we can make sure to get the number accurate. They, in fact, are larger than the Belarusian army. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one is a $10 super chat from Russ Rizzo, who has a Rodney Dangerfield script for you.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I can't get no respect around here. I go into this bar with a duck under my arm. The bartender says, where do you get the pig? I said, oh, man, that's a duck. Bartender says, I was talking to the duck. Oh, man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. And my wife calls me ugly, too. I sat there and got in the car the other day, and she told me, hey, this is no dogs allowed. Oh, man, I'm telling you, it's terrible, real bad. Oh, man, I'm telling you, real bad. The other day, I went home, and I sat there and I looked at my kid. I said, hey, what are you doing? He said, wow, I came from you. Oh, man, I'm telling you, it was a real burn, real burn. Oh, man, I'm telling you.
He said that. I hope you got what you were asking for, Russ Rizzo, and thank you so much once again for the support. You opened up the can of worms, which is my voice impersonations. As for some reason, the super chats now come in at 1,000,000 miles an hour. That's so weird, because like the whole entire like chat is now yellow and orange. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And someone said, the F? What is this? We don't know either, but it happens sometimes. It flares up. I get no respect.
Oh, man,
but anyways,
I get no respect around here. I try and suppress my real self, and whenever I let it out, people go, what the hell? Oh, man, I'm telling you, I'm a freak. I'm a real freak. Oh, man, I'm telling you.
Man, I'm telling you. But with that being said, we're on to our next super chat, which goes to What Would You Do If? Who puts in a $20 donation. And that used to be a really good show on TV, by the way. And they said, look, USA and Ukraine will be unstoppable. All Ukraine needs is more tech and training, especially air tech. I think if we do enough together as fellow supporters of peace, even if it means hypocrisy, this terror can end. Much love.
Thank you so much for the support. What would you do if? And I like that show. Hello, I'm so-and-so Quinones, and with What Would You Do? And then, they would always have something crazy happen, like, somewhat like a mass shooting happens in a grocery store, and they're trying to see if you would actually try and stop the shooter. And then for some reason you don't, and he comes out of the corner and goes, hey, why didn't you stop the shooter? It's like, he's a shooter, man. Like, what am I supposed to do? But, I'm just kidding. It was usually a lot more tame than that, like someone being rude to a cashier and seeing what would people do. But still, it was a great show. I'm not going to lie. It was an amazing show. And I would agree with you that the United States and Ukraine would be unstoppable. Well, actually, the United States is already unstoppable. We're just trying to get Ukraine up to speed on being the unstoppable. And I would say if we do give them enough training and a little bit further support, they will certainly become one of the strongest. Well, I believe right now they may actually be one of the stronger land armies in Europe at the moment, at least in size, training, and equipment. So, I thank you so much for the support. Hopefully we can help them to further refine their armed forces so that way they can become a vital and strong part of NATO, securing the far eastern frontier of the alliance once the war ends. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for appreciating this channel enough to find it worthwhile to support, because folks like you make this channel possible. I don't think you have supported this channel before, if I remember correctly.
I don't think they have.
I don't think they have, and I was trying to make sure I was correct on that. And I got to thank you so much, because folks like you who support this channel, you make this thing possible. And and usually I try and tone this speech down a little bit, but considering that you're the first I believe this is the first time you supported the channel, folks like you actually make this stream possible, because we aren't supported in any other way rather than through the viewers, and y'all are the ones who help us to keep everything running behind the scenes, helping us to be able to pay for rent, helping us to be able to eat, among all the other things, the coffee fund, the pizza fund, and so on, that make this channel possible. And I got to thank you so much for supporting this channel, because without it, this wouldn't be possible. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Sully Canuck, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much for that support, as always. And Sully said, hello once again from the Canadian London, and please take a question from the live chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Sully Canuck, and helping this channel to keep on running. And funnily enough, we had some friends that we just saw in the live chat tonight who are from Canada. Hey, I don't know if they're still watching. Are they?
Well, probably not. It's hard to check these days.
Oh man, I'm telling you.
I can't find them. Anyways, maybe they're watching, maybe they're not watching. They came in and said some really kind stuff in the live chat. That's why we would, hey, like early on in the stream because we saw them in there. But still, we just probably had some friends pass right through London, Ontario on their way back to America. But still, really cool to know that you're a part of the Leaf Spring Army all the way up in London, Canada. Not London, England. We also have viewers from London, England in tonight. I believe, if I'm correct. Actually, I don't want to say the name because I think I'm going to get it wrong, but I remember someone in the countdown at the beginning of the stream said hello from London in England, and I said hello back to him, hello to London, but I forgot who it was, and I hate that because I try and remember everyone I respond to. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. We will make sure to get a live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question goes to Kangaroo, who says, could this be a trap to get NATO and the USA involved in the war?
Well, if the nuclear power plant's a trap, I don't really know how that's a trap. That's more like a trap for the Russians, activating Ukraine's trap card, which is going to be U.S. military involvement. Because it's not really like we're going to get in there and go, oh no, we're being slaughtered. You know, it's more like, oh no, the whole Russian army just died on one highway like the Iraqis did in the Gulf War, and now we're just racing to Moscow now. And oh no, there's ICBMs coming in 5 minutes. That's what it would really be like. But I would honestly think it wouldn't be a trap. That would be a stupid decision by the Russians, probably a short-sighted one to just affect Ukraine, and then it would end up affecting them to no end, and there would be hell to pay. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we did answer that live chat fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Bud, who says, have you heard of any of the new weapons and technology that the U.S. military is coming out with?
We've heard a lot, actually mostly from viewers, like the Rapid Dragon missile system, the THAAD, the Thor, a load of them. I can't think of them all even. The United States is always producing new and amazing ways for us to eliminate people around the world. Actually, I'm not really into that arms dealer talk. We're killing folks around the world, people we disagree with. And wow. You know, everyone in the defense world, Matthew, they always like to go, and this will take care of the opponent's downrange with this 14.5 millimeter anti-material rifle. So what do you use this thing for? You use it to dispatch rival forces that you disagree with in open combat. What I would just say is you're shooting them, you're killing them. That's what we're doing. That's what this is for.
I like to say that we're making weapons to extinguish threats globally.
We're killing them. That's what we're doing. But the United States is always coming up with new and creative ways to kill folks we disagree with around the world. That's just how it works. And I know no one likes to hear it like that, but that's war boiled down to its basics. We disagree with these people, and so we're, killing them for it. And so, we're doing a pretty good job at it.
Although it's in self-defense, to be fair. It's always in response to someone doing something to us first.
Yeah, I mean,
most of the time.
Well, not Iraq or Afghanistan.
Well, most of the time.
Well, Afghanistan.
Hey, well, watch it.
Afghanistan was because we went into Afghanistan because we thought Osama bin Laden was there. Iraq, on the other hand, I mean, that could be argued. But anyways, moving on.
It always goes south whenever we do something in an offensive capacity. It's always good to be on the defensive side for us.
Yeah, and also it's good for morale as well, because no one really likes to fight offensive wars. Everyone likes to defend their homes. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. We've heard about some of the systems. We haven't heard about all of them. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. A very weird one just came in the live chat, Matthew. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Tyler, and hopefully I'm not butchering his last name, Rufiner. And thank you very much for that support. And he said, not sure if you guys are interested in Formula Drift. I am, actually. He says, well, there's a dude from Ukraine competing this year, rooting for Oleksiy Holevnia and Slow Ukraine. And I have to say, I'm not particularly familiar with the exact drivers in Formula Drift, but I do watch it on YouTube from time to time. Super cool. Obviously, I love drifting. I love cars in general. But yeah, I'll definitely be rooting for him because Slow Ukraine.
And slow Ukraine. And I don't actually follow Formula Drift. Matthew does, though. And I'll be wishing the guy luck as well. I'm not really a big one into sports at all. It's very rare for me to watch, but if I'm ever watching, I will be rooting for him. And so thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one is a $10 super chat from Guamson Cruz. And thank you for that support as well. He says, if I gotta be buried in Ukraine so my nieces won't have to bury their husbands when they grow up, then I'll consider my life well spent. Let's kick the tires and light the fires, Moscow, by next month.
And I thank you so much for the support. And let's see. I guess that's a good way of looking at it. And also, I like the kick the tires and light the fires thing. I've never heard that one before. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Guamson Cruz. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you also for supporting Ukraine and wishing them the best in this war. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Mike. And thank you, Mike, for that support. He says, had Prigozhin built up Wagner and Rostov as self-appointed governor, he could have single-handedly stopped the war. Guys, ruminate the possibilities.
And thank you so much for the support, Mike Minners. And I would say that that is a pretty good idea. If he had done that and appointed him the governor of the oblast, it could have most likely stopped the war because the Russians would have had to have focused on what was going on back there. He really didn't even have to go to Moscow. He had the entire Russian army hostage inside of Ukraine at that point, and as long as they have just cut off supplies to him, the Russians would have had to have retreated from the lines and fight their way out of Ukraine and through Russia to try and connect to supply lines again. So that would have ended up being detrimental to the Russian war effort in Ukraine. Sadly, that's not the way it turned out, but that would have been an amazing outcome. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $5 super chat from Badger Resistance, who says, Enforcer, if NATO does go into Ukraine and a full-out war happens, will NATO be too depleted in missiles, equipment, and armor?
You see, that's all Russian propaganda. You know how much we spend on the military? Oh, yeah, it is. You know how much we spend on the military, folks? In the United States, we spend $700 billion a year on the military. And as soon as we started to send the old javelins to Ukraine, we immediately started to fill out new purchase orders for brand new javelins. And so we did. And so while we're sending the old stuff, and honestly, the old stuff, the older things get in the military, the less they work. We sent some of the old stuff, and some of those little javelins ended up misfiring over there here and there. And we've got brand new, fresh javelins that will not misfire when used. And so the honest answer is, no, we're not out. We largely use the war in Ukraine to empty out supply yards and supply depots here in the home front, so that way they can be emptied out and clear the way for brand new equipment for us to purchase here in the United States, and then stockpile and wait for the day that we enter a conventional war. We would curb stomp the Russians, no doubt about it. That's why we spend so much money. We plan on curb stomping everyone in the world, and it just takes a decent amount of money, about $700 billion a year, to be able to do something like that. And also, it's silly to say that we would run out, considering that we're not being sanctioned. We can produce javelins and all of this equipment however much we need, however much we want. We have unlimited access to the technology, the chips, and the equipment to produce this stuff. It's just a matter of filling out purchase orders and then having them produced. So we have, I think the last Department of Defense said, we had completely rebuilt our javelin stockpile around 4 or 5 months ago at this point. And it's back
Shout out to Troy, Alabama for that. They're coming in clutch.
Shout out to the Shadow Wizard Money Gang. We love casting spells. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And do not fear, the United States is here, and they will curb stomp the Russians. In fact, we will curb stomp them along with the help of all of our European friends. Because while we are in the United States, and the U.S. is the biggest military in the world, the Europeans in a war like that would be hand in hand with us. We would be largely hand in hand with the Europeans. They would be the first ones there in mass. They are in Europe, and we would come on over there and we'd help them on to Moscow. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Margaret Hemsley, and thank you very much, Margaret, for that support. She said, "Hi, bros, you rock," and thank you. And quiz question: which tank was designed by Porsche as 1942 for Germany? And the answer to the question is the Panzerkampfwagen Maus was never completed.
And thank you so much for the support, Margaret Hemsley. And you wouldn't believe it, Porsche actually has a very interesting history as far as Nazi Germany went. You see, they're
yes,
always
they do, for sure.
Yeah, they're always known for designing really cool cars, kind of like how Volkswagen is also known for designing a really neat Beetle. But the thing is that Porsche didn't just design the mouse. No. He actually designed a lot of stuff. He designed this stupid thing called the Ferdinand. The Ferdinand tank destroyer, not the bull from the movie. I don't know what's up with the internet these days and thinking that people want to see cutesy stuff like that. This is the Ferdinand tank destroyer. It is ugly and it's very stupid. It actually does not have a coaxial machine gun, so they had to come up with a way for the crew to be able to shoot off the Russians that climb onto this tank. So they gave them guns, and I'll see if they have a picture. One second, let me go get the curved barrel STG. Curved barrel? STG. Here we go. They gave him these things with the bent barrels right here, like some Looney Tunes cartoon, because there was no machine gun. So Russian crewmen, Russian infantrymen could just end up climbing up onto this tank, and there's nothing to stop them, unless if they get hit by the main gun. And so what they did is they gave the commander, who has like the only cupola on the top of this tank, an STG-44 that had an attachment on it that gave it a curved barrel. So that way he could stick this thing out of the cupola and just pull the trigger and fire it off and just spin it around a little bit and hopefully shoot everyone off the top of the tank without having to stick his head all the way out. Is it stupid? Yes. Did it work? Not really. But this was their attempt at trying to fix the problem with the thing having no guns. No machine guns.
Can you imagine how quick that barrel, ran out and needed replacing?
Dude, probably like within 5 rounds, honestly. I think there's actually a picture of one of these with a busted barrel somewhere.
I'd imagine that probably happened a lot.
Probably too much, really. Like, in all honesty, way too much. Oh my
But let me
God.
show you something about Porsche, because I know a little bit about their car side of things. Punch in on a new tab, the 2023 Porsche GT3 RS.
Porsche GT3 RS. So let's take a look at this thing. Oh, wow. That's actually...
So
oh, my.
You see this beautiful piece of work right here. This is a modern masterpiece by Porsche. One of the coolest cars ever made with a flat 6. Super cool car. Now punching in on a new tab, the Porsche Type 64, and this is where it all started. This was back when they worked, very unfortunately, with the Nazis. This was the first car ever developed by Porsche, this thing right here. It's also one of the most expensive cars ever to head to auction as well. I think it sold for like 160 million or something to some person that wanted to put it in their garage.
Oh, this thing's ugly.
Yeah, it's rough. It's like there's some pictures that do it justice a little bit better, but I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? that would be a tough sell for me. Let's see, when was this thing made? What year? Oh, 1939. Uh-oh. That's not the good year. But anyways, fairly interesting. Pretty cool to know that. I actually didn't know that about Porsche history. But getting back to the elephant, he also designed the goofy thing that you were also talking about, Margaret Hemsley. Not that, not the book. It's the tank. Let me go find the tank. There we go. This is the mouse, which translates directly into English as the mouse. It's spelled M-A-U-S in German, but it's spelled as the mouse, like the field mouse in English, which is kind of silly because it's the biggest tank ever made in terms of tonnage. This thing weighs something like 250 tons. It's about the weight of a train. And it has one 128mm main gun right there, and it also has a coaxial 75mm gun, which is the gun you would find on an M4 Sherman. It's about the same size and everything. Once again, the Germans decided that it was not smart to put a machine gun on this thing, so it would have had the exact same problem as the Elephant right here, or the Ferdinand. So a really stupid design again. A really crazy one, though. They actually ended up making one of these and operating it, and it worked. And then it caught on fire, and so there's no operational example of this left in the world. They had 2 of these, by the way. I forgot to explain that as well. The one that actually worked, it burned to the ground, and so all it had was the hull and also this turret here. And you can also see some of the burn damage to the barrel there, because this turret actually comes off of the first operational mouse, and the turret was then moved and placed onto the hull of the second mouse that really didn't exist beyond just its basic frame. There was nothing inside of it. And so that's
this
how...
thing must have had S-tier armor capabilities. My goodness.
Actually, you can actually see holes in the front glacis. I'll try and show you this, where they tried to armor test it. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find you that. Also, that's the hull for the mouse in the modern day. That's where they found it. pretty cool building. But anyways,
Oh, is that it?
yeah, that was the building. Yeah,
Oh.
I was waiting for a reaction right there. I was like, oh, okay. But let's see here. Let me try and what in the world was I about to pull up? I think I lost my train of thought.
The
right there.
holes in the armor on the mouse.
Oh yeah. Mouse frontal armor. Let me see if I can get you a picture of this. This is really cool. You can actually see the holes still in it right there. You can see that they fired some of the higher caliber Russian tank guns at this armor to try and figure out if it would penetrate the armor or not. Turns out it wouldn't. I think the armor
Good
was something
lord, that
like...
thing is wide.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah, and what's so stupid about this thing is that it's so heavy it could never cross any bridge ever. It couldn't even cross the biggest and heaviest rated bridges in Europe. So if it ever came up to a river, it's done. It has to find a way around the river, so it pretty much has to go to the source of the river and then around the source of the river to try and get past it, or it has to snorkel. And some rivers in Europe, you can't really snorkel. And on top of that, it would probably get stuck in the mud underneath because this thing was massively underpowered. I think it only had like 600 horsepower engine inside of it. Let me check that though. Let's see, the engine. It would have been a V12. I don't know how much horsepower this thing got though. Let's see.
Back in the day, the V12s didn't make the horsepower they make today, so it was probably kind of low.
So this is actually an aviation engine. Can't find... Wait a minute, hang on. 1,600 horsepower just about? So actually, that's a lot.
That one?
Yeah, but I don't think it was getting torque, though.
Well, I'll take it back then. Maybe this one was pumping out some serious horses.
Man, that thing got that. But anyways, with that,
Damn.
I hope
All
that,
right.
I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support with Margaret Hemsley. But that's a little story about Porsche and their little John is joining war criminals. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Craig Platel, who says, FYI, only 14 Ohio-class carry SLBMs 4 have been converted to cruise missiles subs.
And thank you for sharing that with me, because I was wondering why there was a special note being made about only 14 of them being needed to carry out the task, the strategy, and then another 4 were just kind of superfluous. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and sharing that fun fact with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Neil Visenon, who puts in a 5 and says, Genius, Ukraine training attack pig, and take a live chat.
And that is pretty genius, because no Russian would ever expect to be gored by a boar. You know, they're sitting there, oh, Vadim, it's another day. And then you hear, and he goes, what is that? And then that thing comes charging into the trench and mauls him. That would be crazy. But still, thank you for the support. We will make sure to get a live chat.
And the live chat question goes to Audalicious, who says, why are we only seeing T-Series tanks and not the Western supplied tanks in the clips?
Oh, well, we did. We saw a Leopard 2A6 today. And so with that, thank you for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mr. Poole, who puts in a 5 and says, would the ZNPP going into a meltdown stop the counteroffensive in its tracks?
Most likely, it would. So that's kind of why everyone's also concerned as well. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to William Mears, who puts in a 5 and says, I just saw a news article about Lukashenko claiming he talked to Putin out of ordering Yevgeny Prigozhin's death. And that would go counter to what Budanov said today, that the order had been issued for his death. I really doubt that anyone could talk him out of killing Prigozhin at this point, because Prigozhin took a direct shot at Putin's pride, which is basically his power. So his fate is sealed, in my opinion.
I would have to agree with Matthew on that one. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Scott Jensen, who puts in a 5 and says, what's going on with all those GLSDBs that Ukraine is supposed to be getting?
I don't really know. We keep on hearing rumors that they've made it there, but at the same time, we never really see proof that they've made it there. So at the moment, they're kind of in limbo right now. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Chase Matty, who puts in a 5 and says, what's up, guys? Live chat question, please.
What's up? And thank you so much for the support, Chase Matty. You have been around for a while now, and we will make sure to get a live chat. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to Avari Mendebratis, who says, how effective might a campaign be to alert Belarus citizens of the likelihood that Russia will irradiate them in a few days unless they revolt against Russia, maybe a shot in the dark?
It would most likely be a shot in the dark because for a story to catch on like that and spread enough, it would probably take months or years. And sadly, there isn't enough time for that. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Dupper Bob, who put in a 2 and without a comment. And thank you, Dupper, very much for that support as always. And we also, have a 2 from Majers, who says, "Are the Chechens quitting Putin?"
It
sound like they're talking about like quitting smoking. Are they quitting Putin?
They quit in cold turkey. But to answer that, not from what we understand, it appears that they're trying to stay hardcore Putin at the moment. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And so with that, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are fresh out of Super Chat questions, so we're moving on to our live chat questions, and we have the Morse code decoders of the stream first. We have Mark Hodges, Cfay, Cliff Simonson, Earl Banu, and Paul Schultz. They said tonight's Morse code cipher says, "If Russia does what it looks like they will do, they will pay dearly for it. Glory to Ukraine, and long live the LSA."
That's the sound of money. And y'all got that correct. That is the Morse code message for the night, and hopefully they would pay dearly if they did something like what they're saying at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And so with that, thank you all so much for deciphering that Morse code message. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is from another channel legend.
And the night wouldn't be complete without some animal noises. Matt must be run through the paces to make sure he's on his toes. Duncan VR puts a $15 super chat in, and thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. He says, "Ba Muba, attack pigs. What I miss? Ba ba ba, moo, oink, oink. I was having a gathering and said, oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. Ba ba, moo, ba ba ba. I'm telling you."
And I gotta thank you for the support, Duncan. And you didn't miss much. You just missed the nuclear power plant once again being a massive concern. And I think beyond that, it was just normal frontline news, offensives and such. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Duncan. And also thank you for throwing in the animal noises again. Because would it be a normal Lee Spring Army night without those animal noises? I beg to differ. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one. Ba 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 mooba. Oh man, I'm telling you.
Oh man. Well, the next one goes to I Am Gift Bearer, who says, "Has NATO released a statement as to what they're going to do about the potential situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant?"
I believe they've gotten close to making a statement on it, and I think it was something along the lines of it would invoke Article 5, but I don't want to say that for certain because I'm not really sure if I'm remembering that correctly. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a live chat from Enforcer for President, who says, "I believe Pig Ocean knew that the ZNPP was going to be blown up and wanted out of Ukraine, but the generals would not allow it, and then the march to Moscow began, in my opinion."
Maybe that's possible, because now looking at the radiation fallout zones, it may be possible that he did get some information about that and started to freak out. It's entirely possible. And so with that, bless me. We are on to the next one. That's the second one of the night, Matthew. I'm getting scared.
Oh, I'm telling you. But anyways, our next question goes to Kenneth Prosak, who says, radioactive fallout goes more than on those maps that you showed. Didn't radioactive fallout from Fukushima get detected on the west coast of the U.S.?
It
and
did.
You are correct.
It wasn't in massive amounts, but it did get detected. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well. But that's really only considering the serious areas of radiation. The radiation will most likely circle around the world, but it in most places wouldn't be enough to really mean anything. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does answer that fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
And we have a question from TJS, who says, could Russia be leaving because they're in over their heads and they think it'll be seen as not being culpable if any disasters happen after they leave?
That could be the case, but that would be a very shoddy one if that was what they were thinking, because obviously they would still be responsible because it's over their heads, they're leaving, and they're not telling anyone, hey, we're leaving because it's over our heads, someone needs to take this over. Instead, they're just going to let it melt down and then go, oh, we weren't there. You know, it's like, well, you were holding the territory. So they could be doing that, but it would be a very poor case in their defense. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to the Hine family, who says, why did the International Nuke Power Plant observers leave? They should have stayed to oversee plant safety.
I'm not really sure why they left. I guess it was just a short stay that they were planning. And that was about it. that's really the only thing I can come down to as an explanation, is that they only plan to be there for a temporary amount of time. And so with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Bradley, who says, the IAEA said they can cool the plant for months, and I see it's dry, and I'm sure they know that. And do you know something else? And I will say on this question right here that currently the power plant is being cooled by, we're told, 3 different auxiliary methods. One of them being the primary method is well water. None of these methods were designed to cool the plant completely. That's why it needed that reservoir. So while it may hold out for a while in cooling the plant, it is a method that is not designed to do it properly. So they've kind of jury-rigged it a little bit to work. Also, if any of those 3 things go out, we could be in a very bad situation really quickly, all because that reservoir is basically empty. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to say that the IAEA is downplaying this because the officials at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant have made it clear that it's in a very precarious state and there's not enough proper cooling water for the power plant to operate, and that's what we've been hearing so far. Someone actually just said the cooling ponds are sufficient, not according to the power plant officials at the ZNPP, which have said otherwise. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is Havlin Tough, who says, Enforcer, do you think the Russians are going to use the ZNPP situation to try and freeze the conflict? If they are, what are the chances that the Ukrainians will negotiate with Putin?
I have a feeling that that may be possible. We haven't seen it yet, and there was a there was a Russian delegation of the UN today passing around pamphlets saying that that was not going to happen to the ZNPP, which only makes me think that it possibly will happen at the ZNPP, considering that they did that with Nova Kakhovka Dam as well. I would say they may try and hold the power plant hostage. If they do that, I don't really know what the Ukrainians are going to do in response, because they can either negotiate and give up their territory and give up millions of Ukrainians to the Russians, and also give up the port of Sevastopol, which is kind of what we're supporting them for, is so hopefully they can get that back. Or they don't negotiate, the Russians blow up the power plant, World War III begins, and a decent amount of Ukraine is uninhabitable due to radioactive fallout. So they're really caught in a bad catch-22. Honestly, I wouldn't really know which one they would go with. I have a feeling... I would have to be completely honest with you. I don't have a feeling of what they would go with at that point. It would be such a dire and dangerous situation either way. I wouldn't really know which way they would go. And so I hate to leave you on a bombshell like that where I just don't have an answer to a question, but that is a very, very good question. I guess we'll just have to wait and see if, what Ukraine does when that time comes around. But with that, it is the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor knowing that so many of y'all have been here watching tonight's news. There are 4,500 of y'all that are still here right now. And if you are new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe, make sure to comment, and make sure to like. Subscribing makes us really happy because it lets us know that people do enjoy what we do. And it also lets y'all be notified of when these streams run. And not only that, it also keeps y'all apprised of when our daily war summaries run, which a lot of people are beginning to love greatly. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, LSA. Thank you all for another great stream, and be sure to peep the Twitter. It's good for your health. Slava Ukraine.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.